Chapter 410. Cough, cough. When Qing Weiyu followed Su Li into Cangjin Valley, he heard an extremely repressed cough. When the smoke and wind dispersed, the scene that entered his eyes caused him to be extremely speechless. The sect masters of the small forces that had been hiding in the valley were all heavily injured and groaning on the ground. Many of them were even covered in blood and had been hit by the boulders that rolled down from the valley, causing them to lose consciousness. Qing Weiyu was surprised and curious when he thought of the small disc that Su Li threw out before. How could such a small object have such great power? At this moment, Su Li stopped in front of an old man in a purple robe who was leaning against a mountain rock. Cough cough, counter-array disc. Is there really such a thing in this world? Matrix Master Shen ignored his injury and stared at Su Li's face. He tried to recall, but the girl in front of him could not be matched with any Matrix Master he knew. You are from Zhenlo Group. Su Li did not answer. She glanced at the unique embroidery of Zhenlo Group on the sleeves of the old man, a high-grade Matrix Master. No wonder. Even if Su Guohong is senile, his realm of Matrix Circle will not degenerate so much. Matrix Master Shen blushed and couldn't speak. At the same time, he wondered why Su Li was so familiar with Zhenlo Group. Why didn't Zhenlo Group know anything about this woman? He was not worried about his own life. He had done his best to help Su Yuanhai. Even if he quit now, Su Yuanhai would not blame him. With the support of Zhenlo Group, the Grand Elder of Ni sect in front of him would not kill him unless he was out of his mind. I didn't expect that I, Su Yuanhai, a wise man, would be defeated by a half-grown child, or, Su Yuanhai's low voice sounded, followed by the sound of stones rolling down. Your Excellency, in order to survive, you possess a child. It is against the harmony of heaven and earth. Su Li turned around and saw Su Yuanhai standing up with his hand on his chest. His mouth was bleeding and he looked at her gloomily. After a moment of silence, she suddenly chuckled. If I were you, I wouldn't choose to use the thing in my hand. From the beginning to the end, you have been plotting against our Ni sect. There is a saying that you reap what you sow. Do you understand, family head Su? Su Yuanhai's movement under his sleeves paused for a moment, and he didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, he could feel the boundless pressure coming from his opponent. His intuition told him that if he took the risk, there was a 99% chance that he would fail. The woman in front of him gave him too much pressure. His aura was as obscure as the sea and extremely dangerous, as if he only needed to make a move to take his life in an instant. He's definitely not at the peak of the nascent soul stage. Even if he's not yet a soul formation cultivator, he's not far from it. Thinking of this, Su Yuanhai let out a long sigh and relaxed his body. But he sneered mercilessly, your cultivation is obviously much higher than ours. Even if you don't do anything, you can crush us with your strength alone. Why do you have to resort to such a despicable trick and make us laugh at you? Despicable? Su Li shook her head and couldn't help laughing. The gentle arc on her face suddenly became cold and stern. Stupid guy, don't use these bullshit morals to suppress me. Since there's a shortcut I can take, why must I give up on what's close at hand and seek what's far away? It's simply a waste of my time to fight with you mobs for 300 round. You. Su Yuanhai's expression changed slightly, and he took a deep breath, unscrupulous and unconventional. You are a member of the Diabolism. As soon as this remark came out, all the lords who were still lying on the ground and healing silently raised their heads, with deep meaning in their eyes. Everyone has the right to kill the Avildor of the Diabolism. What a big hat. I can't afford to bear it. Su Li raised her eyebrows and said, my Ni sect has been living in a humble place for development, but your Su family insisted on coming to us and said that I am a member of the Diabolism. Do you believe it yourself, Su Yuanhai? Su Yuanhai couldn't say anything when he heard it, because what Su Li said was the truth. At this moment, he even faintly resented Su Zini in his heart. Huajian's sect didn't show its strength and didn't show any threat. It was clearly a hidden sect that wanted to avoid the world. But Su Zini didn't go to the outside world to practice and improve her cultivation. Instead, she poked a hornet's nest. Now she not only died, but also implicated the whole seventh branch of Su family and its affiliated sects. Su Yuanhai got a headache as he thought about it. Seeing the intimidating look in Su Li's eyes getting more and more intense, his pressure increased greatly. Finally, he couldn't help but bow his head and sigh. This time, my Su family admits defeat. There was no other way. The situation was beyond his control. He couldn't die for the 7th branch of Su family, even though his cultivation was supplied by Su family. People were selfish. Su Li curled her lips slightly and turned her eyes to the lords of small forces. She said in a cold tone, "You all heard it. I have something to discuss with the head of Su family. Irrelevant people, get out of here. I will count to 3. If anyone doesn't want to leave, then stay here forever." 1. After Su Li finished the first order, the lords who were lying on the ground moaning got up one by one and fled out of the valley. They ran faster than usual. Even Matrix Master Shen, who was embedded in the stone wall, broke free, smiled at Su Yuanhai, and ran out of the valley. Su Yuanhai's eyes widened. He felt suffocated in his heart and almost vomited blood. A group of useless good-for-nothings only knew how to escape. If they didn't escape, he might have a chance to turn the situation around. Before Su Li finished the second count, all the people in Cangjin Valley had left. Qing Weiyu also retreated to the entrance of the valley with all the seriously injured elders of Su family, keeping a lookout for Su Li. Seeing Qing Weiyu's action, Su Yuanhai reacted at this time and blurted out, "You have already subdued Meng Sek. It seems that you are not too stupid." Su Li's indifferent words made Su Yuanhai speechless. Finally, he sighed deeply, "I didn't lose unjustly. Not only the strength. The possessor in front of him was far above him in both scheming and scheming. How could he defeat such a person?" Su Yuanhai felt a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart. It was impossible. That's all. Next, let's talk about the compensation. Su Li touched the storage ring, and 2 soft seats and a stone table appeared on the ground. There was also a cup of tea on the table, with hot smoke curling up. She sat down slowly, holding her chin, and looked at Su Yuanhai. "Your Su family deceived me to come out of practice and wasted so much time. Have you thought about how to appease my anger?" Su Yuanhai's face darkened, and he wanted to curse in his heart. "I am the one who suffered the most loss." She even wanted compensation? But looking at Su Li's aggressive posture, how could he dare not to compensate? Su Mengqing and others were still in the hands of Qing Weiyu. If he said no, the Grand Elder of Ni sect would directly order to kill them, and then he would really be finished. Compensation. What kind of compensation do you want? As long as you don't pursue this matter, I will promise you all. Su Yuanhai gritted his teeth and said. His heart was bleeding. But at this moment, he still didn't understand what Su Li really meant by compensation. "You are very good and know what to do." Su Li slowly picked up the teacup and took a sip. "In this case, I won't let you suffer losses. How about making a deal with you?" Su Yuanhai suddenly became nervous. Su Li didn't mention the specific compensation, which made him feel a little bad. "What deal?" "It's very simple." Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. Under the sunlight, they looked a little gloomy in Su Yuanhai's eyes. "I won't touch anything of the Su family. But the premise is that the senior members of the 7th branch of the Su family must follow my orders." As soon as Su Li said this, Su Yuanhai immediately stood up from the soft seat with his eyes wide open. "That's impossible." Su Li raised her eyebrows. "You, Su Yuanhai, just act according to Su Xiao's eyes. Why can't you change your master now?" Su Yuanhai sneered. "You don't have the slightest concept of blood relationship. How can you say that you are not an evil practitioner? I, Su Yuanhai, will not be so depraved if I acknowledge an evil practitioner as my master." The gentleness on Su Li's face gradually disappeared, and her tone became colder. "Surrender or die. You choose one." "Then I'd rather die." Su Yuanhai laughed. "People like you will never understand the fetters of the family and the affection of the family. You want me to betray the Su family? Forget it." Su Li was silent. She didn't understand. "Your father died early, and your mother married another man. You have been alone since you were a child. How can a person like you understand the affection of the family? Your so-called kinship, Don't tell me you're talking about your younger sister, when you were young. Su Li's calm tone sounded quietly. The indignation on Su Yuanhai's face, which was full of passion a second ago, seemed to be frozen by time and completely stiffened. Then, it slowly turned into panic and horror. How do you know? I have my own way. Su Li laughed wantonly and looked at Su Yuanhai with cold eyes. Do you want me to continue? How dare you? Shut up. Su Yuanhai looked ferocious. He knelt down in front of Su Li and grabbed his scalp, shouting, What do you know? I don't want to, but I can't stop it at all. I am too weak. So, I want to be stronger. Stronger. Do you know how sad I am every time she is caught to bleed? You have no idea. Looking at Su Yuanhai's madness, Su Li caught the meaning of his words, and her eyes gradually became strange. Bleed. She was bled when she was a child. Why didn't she remember it at all? Hey, little Su Li, there is something wrong with this guy. Tut. He even begins to hurt himself. It seems that he has a deep mental barrier. Black Lotus appeared and seemed to be watching the fun. Su Li frowned tightly. Seeing that Su Yuanhai was about to bite off his hands, she finally knocked him out with a palm. Her expression was a little uncertain. She had too many puzzles to solve. Who could solve them for her? Su Xiao. He was the strongest practitioner in Su family and one of the 6 Huashan realms in the entire Jiuzhou region. If she wanted to get the information from him, she must appear as the winner above him. In the final analysis, I am still too weak. If I have the cultivation of Huashan realm now, it is enough to sweep across the Jiuzhou region. It will not be so difficult to know the layout of those mighty figures on me. Su Li thought in her mind. She picked up the fainted Su Yuanhai and was about to go out. Suddenly, Black Lotus's surprised and uncertain voice sounded. Chapter 4:11. Little Su Li, don't go in a hurry. Su Li stopped and looked at the ring. What's wrong? Hehe, I seem to have found something incredible. Follow my guidance. Black Lotus Ring said with a hint of excitement. Su Li's eyes flickered. Even when she got the treasures of the entire Kang Lei's cave last time, Black Lotus was shocked at most, but he was never as happy as now. Treasures that are beneficial to his recovery. Su Li thought for a while and turned to the depths of the valley, following the guidance. Along the way, the nearby mountain walls were bare, and there were only yellow loess and black stones. There was not even a little green, let alone any gold mine. Cangjin Valley. Su Li didn't know who named it. Su Li's footsteps were natural and casual, but her psychic awareness had quietly spread out, alert to the unknown dangers around. After walking for about 10 minutes, there was an inexplicable mist in the valley. The deeper she went, the more unclear it was. Even her psychic awareness was limited to a radius of 30 meters around her. Tactical matrix. Su Li's fingers held a wisp of mist, and her expression finally became serious. It's really weird. Black Lotus rolled his eyes. So you didn't believe me at all. The 7th grade tactical matrix is not very difficult to break. Sensing the level of the tactical matrix, Su Li relaxed her eyebrows. After calculating with her fingers, she stretched out her hand and pointed in the nothingness. After a while, the lines hidden in the tactical matrix appeared, and gradually disappeared under Su Li's means. At the moment when the lines completely disappeared, the white mist that shrouded the valley seemed to be alive. After tumbling for a moment, it completely disappeared as if it was blown away by the wind. When her eyes and ears were clear, the coverage of Su Li's psychic awareness returned to the usual size of 100 meters. When she saw the scene that appeared in her psychic awareness, her eyes slightly condensed, and she quickly flew out before Black Lotus urged. Close, close. It's really that kind of treasure, haha. Black Lotus couldn't suppress his ecstasy, but Su Li turned a deaf ear to him. She landed softly and stopped in front of a stone gate covered with moss. No one has been here for at least 1,000 years. Su Li stepped forward and raised her hand to wipe the moss away, revealing the original lines on the stone gate. It was a circular pattern that depicted a coffin. Like a seal, it was deeply engraved on the stone door. It seemed to be the unique mark of a certain sect or clan. I think I've seen it somewhere before. It's very familiar, but I can't remember it. Su Li frowned deeply again, thinking of what Su Yuanhai had said before. Have my memories ever been lost? What's missing? Why did those manipulators erase a part of her memory but not kill her? Su Li was speechless. At this moment, she was slightly perplexed. All sorts of incomprehensible mysteries seemed to indicate that it was absolutely not an easy task for her to investigate the karma of her past life. Even her monstrous body in this life might not be able to withstand it. What are you thinking? Little Su Li, go in and have a look. If this king recovers, who cares what kind of monsters or demons they are, there's only one word: kill and be done with it. Hearing Black Lotus's mean voice, Su Li suddenly came back to her senses. She shook her head, pushed open the stone door and walked in. TSK, who exactly did this girl offend in her previous life? This mark doesn't look too good, a sigh echoed in the space of Black Lotus ring, but it didn't go out of the ring and fell into Su Li's ears. After entering the stone door, Su Li's sight was dark, but it didn't affect her to see the road clearly. Glancing at the end of the stone path not far away, Su Li lowered her eyes slightly and sniffed. It was a pitch-black hole that seemed to devour people. It was very wet here. But after integrating the divine thunder of water, she was very sensitive to the property of water. It was very dry here. Where did the wetness come from? It's not wetness. It's the gloomy feeling of the ghosts produced after the soul was broken. But your soul has been tempered, so the feeling is not very strong. If an ordinary practitioner came here, he would definitely feel scared and see ghost. Black Lotus explained, and his voice became dignified. This place is most suitable for ghost clan and ghost practitioners to practice, and their pneuma can be perfectly hidden in the environment. You have to be careful. Su Li's mind was slightly tense. In other words, Black Lotus couldn't be sure whether there was a strong enemy hiding in this stone cave. It's suitable for ghost clan to practice, so I have the body of evil ghost. Su Li's eyes flickered, and she stepped forward silently. Soon she passed the stone cave door, and a special smell of decay came to her face. It was desolate, and this was a forgotten area. There's no one here. Su Li relaxed her eyebrows, and Black Lotus couldn't help but be surprised. Even I can't perceive it. How do you know? The smell of death is very strong. Su Li walked slowly, and a faint black halo appeared under her feet. She observed the empty and silent surroundings, and said, if there were living people, the smell of death would have been dissolved by vitality, and it wouldn't be so strong as to be substantial. I see. Black Lotus clicked his tongue. He was a spirit without flesh and blood, so it was naturally difficult to perceive the smell of death. When the master and the servant were talking, Su Li suddenly made a light sound under her feet. The sound echoed in the empty cave, which seemed a bit gloomy. Su Li stopped, squatted down, picked up the thing that was trampled, and looked at it carefully. Is this a broken piece of porcelain? Su Li looked at the broken arc-shaped thing on both sides in her hands, which didn't look like a human bone. This place didn't seem to be inhabited, and it was strange that there were broken pieces of porcelain. Su Li frowned and thought for a moment, and then she put away the broken pieces of porcelain and continued to walk inside. After a short walk, she suddenly stopped, and her expression was slightly serious, and even her breathing slowed down. What did you see? Black Lotus was also affected by her, and his voice was low. But in his perception, there was nothing in front of Su Li except a square outline. Su Li didn't answer. She waved her sleeves gently, and the wind blew the dust and debris away. The square outline in front of her gradually became clear. After a quarter of an hour, the dust and debris piled up into a hill, and a square pool appeared in front of Su Li. Or it could be said that it was originally a pool, but it was filled with dust because of the long time. In the pool, square stone pillars stood very orderly. According to the height, it could be seen that when it was used at that time, the things placed on the top of the stone pillars should not be above the pool water, and they were nourished in the pool. So many stone pillars, there are hundreds of them. What were they used for at that time? Black Lotus asked doubtfully. Although he had lived for a long time, he didn't know much about the human clan. Especially after so many years of evolution in the cultivation era, many new things appeared. Su Li was still silent. She squatted down to pick up the fragments that had not been swept away, and took out the broken pieces of porcelain that had been put away before. The same material, this. Is it a kill place? Black Lotus's tone became more and more strange. It's not a rare thing to make porcelain. Why do they have to make it so hidden? What if it is the life ring? Su Li's voice suddenly sounded, and Black Lotus's tone suddenly stagnated. He was surprised and doubtful. You mean? Su Li slowly stood up. 9 out of 10, this is a secret place where the life ring was stored. No wonder there are so many broken pieces of porcelain. Black Lotus didn't say anything. How many talents from the outside world did Su Li trap and kill in the reincarnation mirror? The number was definitely no less than 30,000. Although he didn't know that almost all the talents were killed by Ling Li and Fang Yuan, the number was already terrible. After all, they were talents. Generally speaking, on average, a secular city in Qingshui Circle had more than 1,000 qualified children, and among these 1,000, no more than 100 could really embark on the road of cultivation. However, there were less than 1 in 100 cultivators. How rare was that? In each generation of practitioners in Jiuzhou region, there would be no more than 5 talent. In the reincarnation mirror, 100,000 talents died at once. Talents of the same generation as Su Li were basically all dead, and those who survived were all disciples of Holy Sect. I think the situation here at that time should be very spectacular. Su Li sighed slightly, seeming to be a little regretful that she didn't see the scene where the life ring was broken together. Black Lotus's scalp was a little numb, and his voice became cautious. Su Li, go to find the crystal shaped like a black gem. It should be in this cave. Black stone? Su Li raised her eyebrows and spread out her psychic awareness, but only saw broken pieces of porcelain and worthless dust and rocks. Where is the black stone crystal? How to find it? Puff. Black Lotus couldn't help laughing. How can psychic awareness find things like the soul stone? Of course, I look for it with my eyes. Little Su Li, you are really funny, ha ha ha. Su Li clenched the Black Lotus ring, and the electric arc flickered between her fingers. Her eyes became dangerous. Did you tell me it was the soul stone? Huh? No, master, I was wrong. Black Lotus was terrified at once, and said in a very obedient voice. Su Li was not like the time when she had just been reborn, and she could only threaten him with death. Now, the divine thunder of water was enough to threaten him, and he didn't want to taste the taste of electric shock. It's good that you know you are wrong. The electric arc between Su Li's fingers disappeared. Tell me, what is the soul stone? What else can it be? Of course, it is a treasure used to strengthen the soul. Black Lotus muttered in a low voice, feeling wronged, but the information was revealed to Su Li without any mistake. The conditions for the production of the soul stone are very harsh. It can only be produced in a place with extremely strong soul power. But since it used to be the place where the life ring was stored, it is reasonable to produce the soul stone. The soul stone is only useful to the ghost clan. When the ghost clan is not extinct, the human clan may be interested in this place and dig out the soul stone and sell it to the ghost clan. But now, tut-tut, no one cares about it. What's the use of it for me? Su Li asked directly after hearing it. You will know when you find one. Black Lotus kept her guessing, but Su Li didn't care. She began to search around the pool inch by inch. The search was not as difficult as she imagined. After a while, a black crystal the size of a fingernail appeared in Su Li's palm. The surface was glowing with a deep luster. It seemed that if she stared at it for a long time, even her soul would be sucked in by the crystal. Black Lotus, you have wasted so much of my time. If you don't give me a reason. The electric arc flashed between Su Li's fingers. Black Lotus, who had a greedy face, shrank his neck and wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 412. After a while, under the careful guidance of Black Lotus, Su Li finally figured out the role of the soul stone. Since the soul stone was bred with the power of the soul, its effect was naturally related to the soul. Whether for the spirit of a treasure like Black Lotus or for practitioners of Ghost Clan, it was extremely difficult to recover if the soul was obliterated, and the soul stone was exactly the magic treasure to recover the soul. In addition, the soul stone could also improve the comprehension and speed up the practice of the secret method of soul. A long time ago, when Ghost Clan was strong, there was a soul hall made of soul stones in their base camp, which was used to reward clansmen for healing and enlightenment. It used to be the place that every Ghost Clan yearned for. Now, Ghost Clan was exterminated, so there was no such place. Su Li blinked and asked, "You also said that the human clan and the Ghost Clan are essentially humanoid creatures. Can this soul stone restore the souls of the human clan?" Su Li looked at Black Lotus Ring and thought that there would be a fierce rebuttal, but she didn't expect that there was silence. After a long time, Black Lotus's slightly heavy voice sounded slowly. "Yes, it's the same in essence. Human clan can use it, but they can't." "Why?" "Nonsense. Ghost Clan has been exterminated. Where can human clan get the secret method to refine the soul stone? Refining indiscriminately will kill people." Black Lotus's tone seemed a little irritable, as if he recalled some bad memories. Seeing this, Su Li stopped irritating him and continued to look for the soul stone. Such a nail-sized soul stone was not enough for her to practice the secret method of soul tactics, which she got by chance. "I was worried that the progress of soul tactics was slow and incomprehensible, and I was delayed by refining the cave, so I couldn't worry about it. The soul stone is a timely rain." After making up her mind, Su Li's method of looking for the soul stone became more thorough. Every piece of land in the cave was dug more than 3 feet by her, and she didn't let go of any clues. This secluded place where the life ring was stored was not small, and the speed of searching by sight was extremely limited. But this matter must be kept secret, and Su Li had no other way. It took Su Li a month to search the secluded place. During this period, she went out once to send Su Yuanhai and others to Ni sect as guests, and then returned to continue. When the people who stayed in the base camp of Su family received the news, they thought that the head of Su family went to seize the spoils of war, while the lords of various sects who fled back announced that they would practice in isolation. Although the people of Su family felt a little strange, they didn't think much when they thought that the head of Su family had subdued Ni sect. 3656. Su Li looked at the last soul stone the size of a grain of rice that she dug out from the deep soil in her palm and sighed slightly. "It's too little." Even though there were 3,000 of them, every single one of the soul stones was extremely fragmented. If all the soul stones were gathered together, they would only be the size of a palm. "Don't sigh. I saw the amount of broken porcelain you found. The total number of broken life rings here is less than 10,000. It's already a miracle that you can breed a palm-sized soul stone. What more do you want?" Black Lotus said snappily, "I haven't seen a soul stone since the Ghost Clan was destroyed. Why are you so lucky? People can't die in the reincarnation mirror. It would be strange if you could see a soul stone." Su Li retorted lightly. Black Lotus was so angry that he almost choked to death. Damn it. Why did he find that Su Li became more and more impolite to him since she got the divine thunder of water? No. When did this girl ever be polite to him? Black Lotus felt wronged as he thought about it. As he thought about it, he almost burst into tears. Who did he offend? Who was the big boss who had lived for 10,000 years? It was not easy for him to wake up, but he met such a black-bellied and cunning master. It was really, Enchanting, you'd better be alive. Otherwise, where can I find you to get even with? Black Lotus said bitterly in his heart, but his eyes were staring at the fragment in Su Li's hand with passion. He almost drooled. "Master, how about we make a deal?" Su Li glanced at the pocket-sized shadow that was about to come out of the ring with a faint smile. "What's the deal?" Seeing that there was a chance, Black Lotus's tone suddenly became more enthusiastic. "Master, think about it. I believe that even if I can't compete for the first place in the ranking of ancient treasures, I will never fall out of the top 3. As long as I recover fast enough, Master, with my assistance, your cultivation will be able to rise rapidly and reach the realm of immortals. Why do you still need to worry about practicing resources?" Su Li raised her eyebrows and thought about it. Black Lotus didn't know that he seemed to have spilled the beans, and continued to say, "If I didn't remind you this time, you must have missed the soul stone. As long as you give me half, no, a quarter, I still have a precious swordsmanship of the body refining school. After you master it, you will be able to kill God and Buddha." At this time, Black Lotus finally found that there was something wrong with Su Li's eyes. He gradually lost his confidence and his voice gradually disappeared. He tried to recall what he said before, but he didn't think there was anything wrong. Fortunately, he didn't have to think about it soon. The top 3 treasures. Su Li supported her chin with one hand and looked at Black Lotus ring, which made Black Lotus's scalp numb. Why didn't I see it at all? Since my rebirth, you seem to have taught me nothing but the common sense of ancient cultivation and a pirated Sueyu tactics. From the first hurdle of Lianqi realm to the 18th hurdle, it all depends on my personal luck. Black Lotus, how much effect did your mouth play? You don't offer the cultivation methods in your hands to master for practice, but hide them and wait for the critical moment to snatch the practicing resources from me. This time it is a school of swordsmanship. Is it possible that next time it will be a school of boxing or saber? I have been wondering. Black Lotus, you boast of your high status and don't take the reincarnation mirror seriously. I originally thought that you were just boasting, but now, I kind of understand. Black Lotus looked at Su Li blankly and was stunned for a while. Who am I? Where am I? I just want some soul stones to restore my spiritual body. How can I become a selfish, shameless, and despicable person? Little girl, are you crazy? In the space of the ring, Black Lotus slapped himself twice and cursed loudly. While scolding, Black Lotus couldn't help thinking. Why do I still feel that what this girl said is a little reasonable? I seem to be really selfish. There are so many secret methods and fighting methods in my head, but except for the all-spirits tactics, it seems that it really has no contribution. Even the complete version of the secret records of Black Lotus was finally found by Su Li herself. Hiss. It's too much. Black Lotus pondered and hesitated whether he should give the swordsmanship to Su Li without the soul stones to let her calm down. Su Li looked at the silent Black Lotus ring and slightly hooked her lips. She turned into a stream of light and left the valley. Before leaving, she collapsed the secluded land. She didn't want to leave any flaws. If the first hurdle of the soul tactics is really what I understand, the matter of the Su family will be much easier. While muttering, Su Li rose into the air and disappeared. Before she disappeared, the ring of reincarnation mirror on her waist shook slightly, revealing a little beast phantom. If Su Li noticed it, she would find that the little beast was staring at Black Lotus ring with a gloating look. Idiot, you are the ghost Lotus supremacy who is more than 30 places higher than me. How can you be fooled by the ancient supreme treasure? Bah! You are a disgrace to our supreme treasure. The little beast's pupils were deep. It turned its head to look at Su Li, who didn't feel it at all. A strange look appeared in its eyes, which contained some inexplicable covetousness and fear. The daughter of destiny who was forcibly created by that group of people can reincarnate. Is it because, if she knows the truth, Qingshui Circle will be in a big mess? Tut, Su Li naturally didn't know that the mirror spirit of reincarnation mirror was attached to the mirror frame and woke up. After returning to Ni sect, she didn't go to see Su Yuanhai and others who were taken good care of. Instead, she went directly to the forbidden land of the back mountain to practice in isolation. After being scolded, Black Lotus was a little dispirited. But, in order to make up for the non-existent debt, he simply passed on the secret refining method to Su Li. In the additum, Su Li put a fragment in the middle of the lamp and carefully scratched the side of the lamp with her nails. The friction made a harsh sound, and at the same time, a special frequency was transmitted. The soul stone fragment that was originally lying quietly on the lamp immediately trembled and burst into sparks. Then, a dense white flame quickly sprang out from its surface. The white smoke shrouded the additum. Su Li immediately felt that the originally silent soul became active, and the normal flow of thinking suddenly accelerated. The doubts left in her heart instantly emerged in dozens of deduction directions. The effect is immediate. My thinking is much more active. Su Li looked at the jumping flame on the lamp and put a pile of fragments next to the soul stone for it to burn. Then she slowly closed her eyes, and the secret method of soul tactics from the triangular copper coin appeared in her mind. Seeing this scene, Black Lotus sighed with an itch in his heart. Why didn't I treat this girl better before? Now I want to steal it, but I have no face. The mirror spirit, who was taking a nap in the space of reincarnation mirror, opened its eyes and muttered idiot. It didn't dare to be as rampant as before. In the environment of the soul stone, Su Li's soul was very sensitive. If it was broken into pieces again, it would really die. Achoo! Black Lotus suddenly sneezed inexplicably. Who is scolding me? Those who know me should have died long ago. You are the one who should have died. Your whole family is dead. The mirror spirit forgot the danger of being discovered, and scolded loudly in the space. In the middle of scolding, it suddenly realized and sighed. The ghost clan was miserably schemed against. They died together with those things. Ghost Lotus's whole family is really dead. Tut! Black Lotus sneezed again and suddenly had a bad feeling. Is there really someone who is still alive like me? It's terrible. It's said that I will be the dominator after 10,000 years. Old Bai, you don't keep your word. Chapter 413. The soul fire was still burning for 5 days and 5 nights. Half of the soul stone fragments Su Li brought back were gone. Black Lotus felt a pain in his heart. Just when he was about to lose control of his mind to rob, Su Li finally stopped and waved her hand to extinguish the soul lamp. Little Su Li, let's. Black Lotus rubbed his hands and was thinking of something nice to say. When he saw Su Li's dark eyes suddenly opened, he was shocked. At this moment, the originally dim Aditum suddenly brightened for a moment. Black Lotus's mind was even more stagnant, and the rotating speed of the lotus pattern on the ring also slowed down. This girl's soul power has increased greatly. After the discomfort, Black Lotus looked at Su Li's eyes, which were getting brighter and deeper, and his expression was a bit broken. In addition to restoring the soul injury, the soul stone could only improve the power of understanding for a short time. How could it become the power of the soul for Su Li? It was not scientific. Black Lotus began to doubt his life again. Su Li did not notice his abnormality. After restraining her momentum, a touch of joy appeared in her eyes. The first level of the soul tactics is finally completed. The secret method of the soul is too difficult to practice. Su Li sighed, and Black Lotus couldn't help but roll his eyes. The secret method of the soul was different from the ordinary cultivation method. Generally speaking, only practitioners of Huashan realm who had materialized the soul could practice it. Below Huashan realm, the soul was just a hollow soul invisible to the naked eye. It was simply a fantasy to practice the secret method of the soul by relying on the hollow soul. Of course, there were geniuses who had materialized the soul before Huashan realm, and those talents could also practice the secret method of the soul. As for Su Li, who had forcibly practiced the secret method of the soul before materializing the soul, Black Lotus could only curl his lips and curse, extravagant. Half of the rare treasure used to restore the soul was wasted. Wasn't it extravagant? Su Li glanced at the depressed Black Lotus ring and didn't care about it. She opened the Aditum door. Yang Zai, who was sitting and waiting outside the Aditum, heard the movement and immediately opened his eyes. He rushed to the door and said respectfully, "Master." Su Li responded and looked at Yang Zai with a strange look. Yang Zai touched his face and asked in confusion, "Master, is there anything wrong?" Su Li shook her head. "Take me to Su Yuan Hai." Yang Zai immediately walked in front to lead the way, but he secretly thought about Su Li's strange look. Did he do something wrong to make Master angry? Staring at Yang Zai, who was meditating, Su Li increasingly felt that the brainwashing ability of Reincarnation Mirror was terrifying. Black Lotus, is your grade really above Reincarnation Mirror? Black Lotus flew into a rage when he heard this. Nonsense. I'm ranked in the top 3. That stupid donkey isn't even fit to carry my shoes. At his waist, the Reincarnation Mirror trembled slightly. Su Li seemed to be unaware of it and continued to say with interest, "How terrifying is the bewitching power of Reincarnation Mirror? I have met 2 people who entered the illusion of reincarnation that year, Dongfang Wuxue and Yang Zai. Even if they have awakened their real memories, they are still the ones in the Reincarnation Mirror. They betrayed the sect and were reviled by thousands of people, but they still feel that they are maintaining their original hearts. This idea will probably not change until they die. But you, Black Lotus, Black Lotus's face darkened, and he said stubbornly, "What's the big deal? Little Su Li, how can you compare me with Reincarnation Mirror in its heyday? Besides, Reincarnation Mirror is destroyed now. If that stupid donkey is still conscious, he is definitely more useless than me." "I see," Su Li smiled thoughtfully, and then changed the topic. "Black Lotus, do you think there is any other secret method of soul that can achieve such bewitching effect except Reincarnation Mirror?" "Of course there is," Black Lotus blurted out without thinking. "If the ability of Reincarnation Mirror is unique, the ranking of that stupid donkey will definitely be higher. It's a pity that there was a soul cultivation genius who created a secret method of soul called Tiantian. Although there are many restrictions in its use, its effect is not much different from that of Reincarnation Mirror." Su Li suddenly understood and smiled without saying anything. Black Lotus suddenly thought of something, and his face changed slightly. "Soul tactics." While they were talking, Yang Zai had taken Su Li to the dungeon of Ni sect, which was specially used to lock up disciples who had made mistakes. Su Yuanhai's cultivation was sealed, and he was locked up in a cell alone. Although he was tortured a little these days, he was a talented person at that time. In just one day, his injuries had almost recovered. The only trouble was the seal set by Su Li herself. Su Li did not cover her trace when she came. Hearing the sound, Su Yuanhai immediately stopped breaking the seal and opened his eyes vigilantly. When he was about to pretend to be seriously injured and lie on the ground, he heard the girls chuckle. "Don't you think it's too late to pretend to be injured now?" Su Yuanhai froze and stopped. When he looked up and saw Su Li, who had walked to the front of the cell, his heart fell to the bottom. Even if he restarted his cultivation, he had no power to fight back in front of the Grand Elder of Ni sect. "Who are you?" After a moment of silence, Su Yuanhai couldn't help but ask. It was absolutely abnormal to know his past. Few people in the Su family knew what happened to him in his childhood, let alone an outsider who had never been in contact with him before. Su Li's eyes flashed. She had a vague memory about Su Yuanhai in her childhood. But judging from Su Yuanhai's reaction, it was obvious that something happened between them in their childhood. "Now, I will give you two choices." Ignoring Su Yuanhai's words, Su Li said lightly, "I don't want to repeat the first choice. Do you agree or not? You know, this is your last chance, and time is running out." As soon as she said this, the cell suddenly became silent. Su Yuanhai felt bitter in his heart. He didn't want to die, but if he really betrayed the Su family, his end was likely to be more miserable than death. "What's the second choice?" Su Yuanhai took a breath and asked weakly. Su Li raised her eyebrows. "So, you refuse me?" Su Yuanhai was silent and couldn't answer. "I'll take it as your acquiescence." Su Li's eyes became indifferent, and she raised her hand to hit him casually. Su Yuanhai couldn't dodge and was hit in the chest. He was blown out like a cannonball and hung on the wall of the dungeon for a long time before slowly sliding down. "Whoa!" Su Yuanhai spat out a mouthful of blood. He only felt severe pain all over his body, as if his bones were broken. But what he was thinking now was not the pain, but why Su Li only seriously injured him instead of killing him directly. Su Yuanhai had no time to think more. His head was dizzy, and he was hit out again. Continuous screams reverberated in the dungeon. Yang Zai, who was guarding outside the door, immediately set up a soundproof matrix. He remembered that Su Li had told him not to let the noise go out. After a while, the whole dungeon became bumpy, and the walls were full of human-shaped holes and bloodstains. Su Yuanhai's eyes were dull, and he lay on the ground like a pile of rotten meat. He was dying, and his mouth overflowed with dark red blood with pieces of internal organs. "Kill me," a faint voice came into Su Li's ears. Su Li's white clothes were not stained with blood. She squatted down and poked the deepest wound on Su Yuanhai's chest. There was no response. "It seems to be enough. If I continue, I will kill him, and the loss outweighs the gain." Murmuring, Su Li slightly opened her 5 fingers and covered the top of Su Yuanhai's head. She activated the soul tactics, and immediately 5 transparent threads shot out from her fingertips and penetrated into Su Yuanhai's skull without any hindrance. The method of 5 thread soul control? In the space of the ring, Black Lotus recognized Su Li's action. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help cursing, "Damn it. Which old bastard had nothing better to do? How was this soul tactics? This was clearly the heart of heaven. What kind of monster is she to learn the secret method of soul control in 5 days? It turns out to be the will of heaven. In the reincarnation mirror, the pupils of the phantom of the little beast shrank, and it was full of confusion and helplessness at this moment. What should I do? I offended her too much in the last life. If she knows that I have regained consciousness now. The phantom of the little beast couldn't help shivering, but he didn't notice that Su Li, who was concentrating on operating the method of soul control, suddenly turned her eyes and inadvertently glanced at her waist. Half a day later, Su Li's right hand left Su Yuanhai's head, and her face was slightly pale. Guards, swish. Before Su Li finished her words, Yang Zai appeared in front of the cell. He glanced at Su Yuanhai, who was lying on the ground, and said respectfully, "Zai is here." Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and said tiredly, "Take him to the guest room and cure him." "Ah! What?" Yang Zai was stunned and touched his head. Wasn't Su Yuanhai their enemy? Why did Master suddenly find his conscience after beating him half to death? Despite his doubts, Yang Zai didn't ask more and left the cell with Su Yuanhai. The elders of Su family on the other side of the cell still didn't know what happened. "Master, did you succeed?" Black Lotus asked cautiously. Su Li glanced at Black Lotus' ring. "How do I know?" Black Lotus choked, but he didn't get angry. He said with an embarrassed smile, "That's true. It's the first time for you to try the secret method. But, if Su Yuanhai is turned into an idiot by you, then kill him. He is just a Yuanying realm cultivator. Don't feel bad." Su Li said casually. Black Lotus couldn't help but tremble in his heart. He said with a hollow smile, "Master, I didn't mean that. Su Yuanhai and you seem to. I don't have the childhood memory. Don't be soft-hearted." Black Lotus was stunned. It shouldn't be. When your life ring was broken in the reincarnation mirror, you should have retrieved all your memories. Even if someone erased your memories, it doesn't matter. Why? Black Lotus didn't finish his words, but his expression suddenly changed and he didn't continue. Su Li was thoughtful, but she didn't ask more. She changed the topic and asked, "What about the swordsmanship?" "Ah!" The topic seemed to change too much. Black Lotus didn't remember it for a while and was at a loss. "You said that you would give me a swordsmanship of Pneuma and blood school. Did you forget it?" Su Li's tone was light, but there was contempt in her eyes. Black Lotus remembered her previous doubts and was indignant. "My level is really higher than the reincarnation mirror." Chapter 414. Remember in 1 second. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Pa. A dim light flashed on the surface of Black Lotus' ring, and a jade slip that had just been inscribed was thrown out by Black Lotus. When Su Li took it, she heard Black Lotus's proud voice sounded, "I used to be the treasure of our clan. How can a bumpkin like reincarnation mirror compare with me in terms of the practice method reserve in my memory? That stupid ass can't catch up with me." After blowing his own trumpet, Black Lotus finally felt that he had regained his dignity. He continued, "This is a cultivation plan that I've tailor-made for you. However, even a monster like you has limited energy. You must know when to give up." Su Li nodded, "Don't bite off more than you can chew." "I understand." After roughly glancing at the profound secret method in the jade slip, Su Li raised her head and pondered for a moment. She suddenly asked, "How much can you recover with 100 pieces of soul stone?" Black Lotus was stunned for a moment, and then he realized what Su Li meant. His eyes suddenly lit up. "I was seriously injured 10,000 years ago, and now my spiritual body is only equivalent to a mortal's soul. If you give me the remaining soul stones, I don't have to worry about falling into a deep sleep again. Get to the point." Su Li frowned. Black Lotus was speechless for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "If your cultivation is higher, I can take you to a place where your talent of Ghost Clan can be improved quickly. Your weak body of evil ghost can be restored to normal within a year. Activate the true talent of the body of an evil ghost." Su Li raised her eyebrows and didn't speak. It seemed that she was trying to figure out the truth of Black Lotus's words. Black Lotus finally saw a glimmer of hope. He immediately panicked. "Everything I said is true. Why would I lie to you? Then I'll trust you this once." Su Li was silent for a while, and suddenly said, throwing the bag containing the soul stone fragments into Black Lotus' ring. Black Lotus was overjoyed at once. At the same time, he wondered why Su Li became so easy to talk to this time. Was it because he gave her the jade slip? Soon, Black Lotus realized that he was overthinking. "Black Lotus, you have to recover well. If you can't bring me to that place, I'll use the divine water lightning to beat you back to your original state. I'll just lose some soul stones anyway. I can afford it." Black Lotus's face darkened. It knew that it was not easy to take Su Li's things. Damn it, this is a huge loss. I hope that place hasn't been discovered by the human race. Sigh. With a sigh, Black Lotus' ring fell silent. His soul power was too weak now, and it would take a long time to absorb the soul stone. Su Li glanced at the empty ring finger and stared at the air for a while. Finally, she turned her attention back to the jade slip. Glancing around, Su Li couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Although Black Lotus liked to brag, there was one thing he was right about. Any of the secret methods stored in the Black Lotus ring would definitely cause a bloody storm. Body-tempering swordsmanship of the Qi and Blood School, Suashing, Qi and Blood Sect, Fist Art, Moon Freezing Fist. Qi and Blood Sect's Saint-Grade Close-Range Movement Art, Indefinite Step. Wind-Style Movement Art, Flowing Wind. Black Lotus gave out 4 cultivation methods at once, and all of them were the works of the top sects of cultivation in ancient times. Su Li carefully studied the first Suashing and soon immersed herself in it. In addition to the cultivation method itself, the jade slip contained more personal insights written by Black Lotus himself, which made it easier for Su Li to understand. Having been with Black Lotus for a long time, Su Li was not completely unfamiliar with the common sense of the ancient cultivation era. Practitioners, no matter in the present or ancient times, could be divided into 3 categories. The first was the practice of law, the second was the practice of soul, and the third was the practice of body. Therefore, when the ancient cultivation era was full of sects, there were 3 corresponding schools that were extremely prosperous. The practice of law was collectively called the School of Heaven and Earth, the practice of soul was collectively called the School of Soul, the practice of body was collectively called the School of Qi and Blood. Among them, there were many special schools and small schools with numerous and messy names, which couldn't be counted by reason. The School of Qi and Blood was the way of the practice of body to become a sage. This kind of practitioners were all coarse and thick-skinned, with great strength and extremely strong survival ability. They could kill a practitioner of law at the same level with one punch, which was extremely terrifying, but it also had a flaw, that was, it couldn't fight with the enemy from a distance. If a practitioner of law in the top school of law could practice a magic method, the power of heaven and earth would be far more powerful than that of the physical body. As long as the practitioner was not entangled, he could completely exhaust the practitioner of law to death. But in general, the practitioners of the School of Qi and Blood had a strong physical body and a stronger survival ability. Among the 3 schools in the ancient times, the practitioners and forces of the School of Qi and Blood were the strongest. Of course, some special schools were not included, such as Chuangxing Path. My physical body is extremely strong, so it will take twice the effort to practice Suashing with half the result. It's the best way to improve my combat ability in a short time. Su Li smiled slightly. Black Lotus is quite well prepared. He even has the body movement and the close-range boxing. Su Yuanhai was immediately excited when he saw Su Li. He knelt in front of Su Li regardless of his injury. I will never forget Master's life-saving grace. This sudden scene instantly caused Yang Zai to be dumbstruck with shock. Life-saving grace? You were almost killed by Master. How come Master became your life-saving grace when you woke up? Could it be that his brain was damaged from the beating? Yang Zai looked up and down. Seeing Su Yuanhai's clear eyes, he felt a chill on his back. What did Master do to Su Yuanhai? Su Li lifted Su Yuan high, who was grateful with her lips curled up. Her eyes were shining. The method of soul control was successful. Although Su Yuan high still remembered everything he had experienced since childhood, his fundamental belief had completely changed into unconditional loyalty to Su Li. "How do you feel now?" Su Li asked lightly. Su Yuan high felt flattered and quickly knelt down and said, "Thank you for your concern, Master. My injury is fine and I will definitely recover in half a month. I am willing to go through fire and water for Master without any hesitation." Yang Zai felt a toothache. Why did these words sound so familiar? Did Su Yuan high learn from him? "Zai, you go out first." Su Li looked at Su Yuan high, who knelt on the ground, and ordered him with her eyes flashing. Soon, there were only Su Li and Su Yuan high in the guest room. Su Li sat down and poured herself a cup of tea slowly. She said softly, "Raise your head. I have something to ask you." Su Yuan high obediently knelt straight and looked at Su Li with a loyal face. "Go ahead, Master. Tell me everything about Su Li's childhood, no matter how big or small." Su Li took a sip of tea and looked at Su Yuan high. The latter immediately felt a burning feeling. "Do you know Su Li, Master?" Su Yuan hai's expression kept changing, but he didn't show signs of breaking down like last time. His soul was controlled. Although he remembered everything and his thinking was as smooth as usual, the mental barrier in his heart was gone. Su Li didn't answer and just sipped the tea quietly. Su Yuan high suddenly felt the pressure and quickly replied, "Master, Su Li used to live in the same yard with me when she was a child, but I don't know her very well. Although Su Li was born by a servant of the Su family, she attracted a lot of attention. I am still puzzled about the specific reason. I remember that my father once told me not to get too close to Su Li. But I was young at that time and didn't listen to him. Soon I got familiar with Su Li." Speaking of this, Su Yuan high gradually fell into the memory and laughed. "I still remember that Su Li was very beautiful when she smiled. She followed me and called me brother. We were very close. It was the first time that someone called me brother. That feeling was wonderful. I swore to her at that time that I would protect her for a lifetime." Su Li listened with her face propped up and her eyes slightly narrowed. She called Su Yuan high brother? Why didn't she remember it at all? Chapter 4:15. 34 Chinese Net. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Later, I broke my promise. Su Yuan high looked gloomy. Because of my cultivation, I couldn't be with Su Li all the time. That day, I finished refining my body, got rid of my mortal bones, and entered Lianqi realm. I ran to the small yard where Su Li lived with excitement, but I saw a horrifying scene. Su Li's eyes were slightly fixed. Su Yuan high recalled the scene on that day. Even though it had been 2,000 years, he still couldn't help turning pale and said with disgust, "Those beasts were eating people. They dug out pieces of flesh from the limbs and back of Su Li, who was in a coma, and ate them raw and drank their blood. I couldn't see any humanity on their faces, only ecstasy and excitement. It seemed that they were eating elixirs instead of human flesh. I vomited at that time." Su Yuan high covered his chest. "I was too young and my cultivation was too low. I was knocked out before I could react. When I woke up, my father warned me that if I dared to disclose what happened that day, not only I would die, but also the whole 7th branch of the Su family would be implicated. I was scared out of my wits at that time, so I quickly agreed. After that, although my cultivation was smooth, every time I thought of what I saw when I was a child, my inner demon would be triggered." Speaking of this, Su Yuan high suddenly froze. Where was my inner demon? He had said so much about Su Li's past, but nothing happened. "Do you know those people who ate people?" The calm voice interrupted Su Yuan hai's thinking. He raised his head and met Su Li's still calm eyes. He felt a chill in his heart for no reason. The master was angry. "Why?" Having no time to think, Su Yuan high quickly replied, "Of course I know them. They were the real geniuses of the Su family in those years. They are 3 generations older than me. Now they are all members of the elders' chamber of the main branch. The lowest cultivation is in the late stage of Yuanying realm. The most talented one, Su Huanli, is already in the half-step of Huashan realm. He has great power and is only one step away from becoming the old ancestor of the Su family. Su Huanli. Su Li's pupils shrank slightly. She recalled the indecisive Su Huanli in the illusion of reincarnation. Su Huanli. Why have I never heard of this name? There's such a person in the Su family. Su Li frowned and asked further. Su Yuanhai couldn't help but smile bitterly. Su Huanli is the trump card of the Su family. I didn't know it until I broke through to Yuanying realm. Later, I went to the banquet of the head branch and recognized him at first sight. Su Li nodded gently. This was very normal. Almost all of the 25 clans had hidden heaven's chosen disciples, and they would not expose them unless it was a critical moment. The Su clan was not weaker than any of the 25 clans, so it would be strange if they did not have hidden heaven's chosen disciples. I was careless. If I knew it, I should have destroyed Su Huanli's life ring in the reincarnation mirror. Su Li sighed. It was dark under the lamp. She had destroyed so many heavenly talents' life rings in the illusion, but she did not notice the people around her. Su Huanli's performance was too ordinary. He was the head of a small family. Su Li always thought that he was a creature in the illusory realm. Since Su Huanli has reached the half-step Huashan realm in the outside world, I may have missed a lot of enemies. Thinking of this, Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and asked, why don't I have any impression of my childhood memory? Hearing this, Su Yuanhai held his breath. Su Li. Although Su Li could force to ask, she did not want to deliberately suppress Su Yuanhai's soul. She had to frown and explained, I had a relationship with her. Why? Do you want to know? I don't dare. Su Yuanhai was in a cold sweat and did not dare to ask further. He answered obediently, that is the effect of illusion-arising powder, which can permanently erase one's memory. This poison is not from the Jiuzhou region, but was given to the Su family by a mysterious senior. There is no cure for it. Illusion-arising powder, a completely unfamiliar poison, and an unknown and mysterious expert. Su Li frowned and had more and more doubts. Why did Su Huanli and others eat meat? She continued to ask in a steady tone, as if those people did not eat herself but others. Su Yuanhai wiped his sweat and shook his head with a bitter smile. I don't know, but I have some guesses. Not all the people who ate Su Li's meat were hidden heaven's chosen disciples. I observed them secretly and found that their cultivation progress was much faster after that. The implication was that Su Li's meat had the effect of improving her talent. Su Li was silent for a moment. She waved her hand to dismiss Su Yuanhai and fell into meditation alone. In this way, my talent in the previous life was probably far more than the heavenly spiritual root, but it was taken away by Su Huanli and others. Since it's already been taken, why am I still being targeted and only released after I'm dead? Su Li's face was very gloomy. Everything was just her guess. The truth could only be known when she caught the real big fish. Su Huanli is a good candidate, but he is in the half-step of Huashan realm. It's a little troublesome. The soft murmur echoed in the room and gradually disappeared. The next day, Su Yuanhai took the people of Su family and left Ni sect arrogantly. Hua Yang accompanied him to put on a play. Although the elders of Su family had thousands of doubts, they didn't dare to ask more about the process of Su Yuanhai's victory when they saw their head was intact and the lord of Ni sect bowed to him. The idiots of Su family are so gullible. Yang Zai watched the Su family leave and couldn't help sneering. Hua Yang shook her head and smiled, don't kill all of them. Su family is strong for a reason, and the people of the main branch are not easy to deal with. Besides, they just trust Su Yuanhai too much. It sounds reasonable. Yang Zai rubbed his chin and couldn't help murmuring when he thought of the scene that Su Yuanhai knelt down when he saw Su Li yesterday. That is definitely not the method to confuse the mind. Su Yuanhai is clearly sober, but his attitude towards master has changed. I am from a holy sect, but I have never heard of such a weird secret method. After a while, Yang Zai scratched his head, forget it. Why do I think so much? Master will not use this kind of thing on his own people. After that, he really stopped thinking and turned away. Hua Yang stood aside in silence, but her eyes were a little strange. Even if she had not seen these talents from various regions, she had heard of them. She also clearly remembered that Yang Zai, who ranked 36th on the Tianjiao list, would never bow his head to anyone. After Su Yuanhai returned to the Su family, the surroundings of Ni sect were completely peaceful. Su Li and others all had a period of absolutely quiet practice. Su Yuanhai claimed that Ni sect belonged to the Su family, and no one doubted it. At least there was no flaw before the group of lords of small sects who were still healing in isolation came out. Su Yuanhai was not a fool. After returning to the Su family, he immediately started to make arrangements. With his current identity, it was very easy for him to spend some time to keep the secret. Meng Qing, you don't have to do anything else next. Pay close attention to Su Yosheng's movements, and report back to me if there is any movement. Su Yuanhai summoned the second elder and told him. He frowned and said, in addition, give her 10% more practice resources. Su Mengqing's face changed when he heard the words, head, this is not appropriate. He could understand that Su Yuanhai asked him to monitor Su Yusheng, but what was the reason for him to increase the practice resources for that demoness? Su Yuanhai's eyes turned cold. Why do you ask so many questions? Do you also want to be a head for fun? Su Mengqing shivered and said that he dared not. This is just to sound her out. Well, it's useless to say more. Just do as I say. Su Yuanhai waved his hand tiredly, and Su Mengqing left. He felt much more at ease. Judging from the tone, the head was not so stupid to support the demoness. It should be known that people in the head family did not like Su Yusheng very much. Time flew, and 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, in the forest of the back mountain, Su Li had changed a wooden sword in her hand, and she stabbed at a mountain rock transported by Yang Zai. Crack, the wooden sword was inserted into the mountain rock, as if it were a piece of tofu instead of a hard rock. Yang Zai, who was serving on the side, saw this scene, and his pupils suddenly contracted. He clearly sensed that the moment the tip of the wooden sword pierced into the rock, a portion of pneuma and blood that he could not understand burst out. Although the surface of the rock was still intact, the entire inside of the rock had been crushed into powder by Su Li. How did she do it? Even if he had seen it many times, Yang Zai still looked puzzled. He did not see Su Li use the genuine energy at all. Why was it so powerful? Su Li put away the sword and stood up. She exhaled softly, and her eyes were bright. The 9th move, done. 2 months ago, she could not even feel the first move. After practicing hard for half a month, Yang Zai began to implicitly persuade her not to waste time. Of course, Su Li would not give up. She kept trying to stimulate the pneuma and blood, and integrated it with the swordsmanship. Finally, on the 23rd day, she made the first move. The sword blasted out, and directly blasted a bottomless pit on the ground. The mountain slid down like an earthquake. Yang Zai was so shocked that he could not come to his senses for a long time. In order not to continue to destroy the back mountain, Su Li had to seal most of her pneuma and blood, and then she changed a wooden sword before continuing to practice. But after continuing, she obviously felt different. It seemed that she had been enlightened. After the first move, the sword moves should be more and more difficult, but she felt that they were getting easier and easier. She made the second move in 1 night. The third move, half a day. The third move, 1.5 days. The fourth move, Su Li was fascinated. She practiced the swordsmanship at a frightening speed, which stimulated Yang Zai. If he did not want to learn something from her secretly, he would have run to practice in isolation. After the 9th move, Su Li did not continue. There were 18 moves in the Tsuashing swordsmanship. From the 9th to the 10th was a watershed. Her intuition told her that it was not so easy to cross the watershed. It was more reliable to stop and accumulate. Before, she finally had some speculations about why she could practice the Tsuashing swordsmanship so quickly. I always see the word Tsuashing, but I ignore that it is a swordsmanship for body refining. The word body refining is not randomly added by Black Lotus. It can really refine the body. Su Li clenched her white palms, and her eyes brightened when she sensed that there was a slight improvement in her physical body. Chapter 4:16. The condition that restricts Tsuashing swordsmanship is mostly pneuma and blood. My physical body is strong and has reached the threshold of practice in advance, so I make rapid progress. I didn't feel the effect of body refining in the first 8 moves, but the 9th move improved. Most likely, this is the limit I can reach now. Su Li stared at the wooden sword in her hand and pondered. I don't know if I can kill someone in the late stage of Yuanying realm with my current strength. Even if I can, there are still 2 small realms to cross before I reach the half-step Huashan realm. Well, it's no use thinking too much. Shaking her head, Su Li began to change her practice plan. She spent some time to stabilize the swordsmanship and the rest time to practice the 2 major steps. At night, she absorbed celestial stones to improve her cultivation and refine Kang Lei's cave. Yang Zai didn't dare to continue to be lazy when he saw that Su Li, who was so powerful, was still practicing hard. After giving some instructions to Lvu, he went to practice in isolation. The sun and the moon rotated, and black and white alternated. Su Li didn't relax for a moment. With the support of celestial stones, her strength was changing every day. The cultivation realm of her previous life was still the same. It was just a process of accumulation from Zhuji realm to Yuanying realm, and there was no bottleneck. Of course, the premise was that Chuangxing path was not a bottleneck. 1 year and 3 months later, on February 17th, Su Li's cultivation stopped at the peak of Zhuji realm. If anyone remembered her age in this life, he would find that she was 16 years old on that day. It's been 3 years since I recovered my memory in this life. Su Li stood by the river in the back mountain and quietly looked at herself reflected in the river. She was 16 years old and full of vigor. The long-term cultivation did not affect the growth of her bones. Now, she was a slim and graceful young girl just by looking at her appearance. No one would believe that she, who looked weak, was the master of several forces. Bone age and appearance are very deceptive, which is convenient for me to do things. There should be news about the tea party that Su Yuanhai mentioned recently. Su Li was thinking in her heart. Suddenly, she heard the sound of feet landing behind her, and then she heard Lvu's voice, "Master, Su Yuanhai sent someone here." "Oh, speak of the devil." Su Li raised her eyebrows and chuckled. She waved her sleeves and flew to the back mountain. A faint and indifferent voice came from the nothingness. "Let Yang Zai and others get ready and act according to the plan." Lvu answered respectfully and flew in another direction with a surge of emotions. In just 2 years, his current cultivation had astonishingly risen to the late stage of the Gold Core realm. Even the most powerful talents in the 25 sects had the same cultivation as Su Li. There was only one person in the 7th branch who had reached this realm. His name was Su Fengchun. This meant that even if Su Li was no match for Su Fengchun, she could still rank second among all the candidates. It was a sure thing that she could get the qualification. How can we compete? Many disciples were gloomy and left while cursing. Most of their thoughts of challenging Su Li had been extinguished. There were still some disciples who didn't want to give up. They followed Su Mengqing and others far behind to see if Su Fengchun would challenge Su Li and let them take advantage of it. Ho ho, the disciples of the family are too competitive. Sorry to make Miss Su laugh. Su Mengqing smiled and tried to get close to Su Li. Before going to Ni sect, the head of the family repeatedly exhorted him to be polite to Su Li and not let her suffer any grievances. In addition, the name Su Jojo was surnamed Su. Su Mengqing couldn't help but associate it. The head of the family was not young, but he didn't have a cultivation companion. Now it seemed that this was not the case. If this girl was really the daughter of the head of the family, she was equivalent to the young master of the 7th branch of the Su family. Naturally, he had to curry favor with her carefully. Su Li smiled and said, "It doesn't matter." Naturally, she didn't expect that Su Mengqing would have such a big imagination. She just felt that the way this person looked at her was a little strange. Even if Su Yuanhai had told him, this person was too enthusiastic. Su Mengqing brought Su Li into the hall and left quickly. There was no accident on the way. The disciples who followed them couldn't help but feel disappointed. Su Fengchun is such a coward. He doesn't even have the courage to challenge. I'm so disappointed. He is the first in the 7th branch of the Su family. Ho ho, say it in front of Su Fengchun if you dare. The person laughed and didn't dare to speak. The challenge of the tea party is around the corner. If Su Fengchun shows up at this time and fights with Su Jojo, he is a fool. Su Jojo, surnamed Su. There is no such coincidence in the world. I think Su Jojo is probably the illegitimate child of an elder. There were more and more gossips outside the door, but the noise couldn't pass into the room. At this moment, in the hall, Su Yuanhai stood beside Su Li, bowing and suppressing the excitement in his eyes. I have arranged everything, and no one will ruin your plan. Su Li shook her head and said indifferently, nothing is absolute. Just get ready. Now take me to the warehouse. Master, this way please. Su Yuanhai hurriedly led Su Li away from the back door. They walked along the flagstone road to the most confidential treasure warehouse of the 7th branch of the Su family. They were not stopped until they were 300 meters away from the gate of the warehouse. Two old figures appeared. Su Li glanced at them and found that their cultivation was above Su Yuanhai's, and both reached the late stage of Yuanying realm. Were they elders who lived in seclusion to look after the treasure warehouse? As the thought flashed through Su Li's mind, Su Yuanhai bowed and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Su Jojo is a genius I found from Ni sect. According to the rules of the tea party for immortals, I will take her to the treasure warehouse to choose a magic treasure as a reward. The two elders of the Su family relaxed slightly. They were clear about the rules of the tea party for immortals. One of them scanned Su Li with his divine awareness and sensed her cultivation. A hint of appreciation flashed through his eyes, and he nodded, it's in line with the rules. Go in. Remember, you can only take one. Su Li nodded and said respectfully, I will keep it in mind. Seeing her modesty and politeness, the other elder didn't stop her anymore and stepped aside. It was absolutely worthwhile to give away a magic treasure for the slim chance of winning the tea party for immortals. Boom, the door of the warehouse was suddenly opened, and the sound came in. Su Yusheng, who was stealing cultivation resources in the warehouse, couldn't help but change his expression. What happened? How could someone open the treasure warehouse at this time? I have painstakingly planned and finally got in. Looking at the large amount of resources in her hands that she couldn't take away, Su Yusheng was struggling. Suddenly, the footsteps came closer. She gritted her teeth and put everything back in place unwillingly. Then she picked up the magic cloak and disappeared into the wall. In addition to the guarded gate, there were many small doors in the treasure warehouse, which could only be opened by Su Yuanhai, the head of the family. Squeak! Su Yuanhai pushed open the door in the deepest part of the treasure warehouse and stepped aside for Su Li to come in. As soon as she entered, Su Li sensed a familiar pneuma swimming in the wall, and soon it left the scope of her psychic awareness and disappeared. Her psychic awareness was unusual. Su Yuanhai didn't seem to notice it, but she sensed it very clearly. Fifth sister ran away. Su Li's expression was slightly strange. Did this girl sneak into the treasure warehouse to steal things from her family? She glanced at it roughly and found that almost all the precious resources for low-realm practitioners were stained with a trace of Su Yusheng's pneuma. She was stunned and speechless. Chapter 417. In order to prevent people from stealing easily, the old ancestor set a restriction on the treasury. The storage ring can't be opened here, so you can only take it by hand. Su Yuanhai didn't notice Su Li's abnormality and explained. Su Li was silent for a moment. Then she stepped forward to pick up the two treasures and tried to put them into the universe ring. As expected, she was blocked and the treasures in her hands didn't move at all. The tactical matrix to reinforce the space is probably Su Guohong's work, but it's nothing for me. Su Yuanhai didn't see what she did, but saw the motionless magic treasures disappear. His pupils shrank slightly, and then he was relieved. He didn't forget what happened in Cangjin Valley. The master could even take out the counter matrix board, so it was not surprising that he had some attainments in the tactical matrix. Putting the treasures back in place, Su Li turned to the weapon shelf. She picked up the few flying swords on the shelf and weighed them. Suddenly, she frowned. Although these flying swords were graded, they were still too poor. Her pneuma and blood were so powerful that ordinary flying swords couldn't bear it. If she wanted to fully exert the power of Tsuashing swordsmanship, she needed at least a flying sword at the level of a treasure weapon as a carrier. The so-called treasure weapon was one of the grades of magic treasures. The magic treasures in Qingshui Circle were divided into 5 grades. Ordinary mortal weapons were not counted. The flying swords made of common spiritual materials and could bear the power of cultivation were called spiritual weapons. There were 4 grades on the net, which were the treasure weapon, the Taoist weapon, the sacred weapon, and the fairy weapon from low to high. Su Li had never seen the magic treasure of the sacred immortal. She only saw a grand elder in Yushu sect in her previous life who had a Taoist weapon, which had the power to destroy the world. It couldn't be activated easily because it was harmful to the harmony of nature. As for the reincarnation mirror and black lotus ring, Su Li couldn't estimate their specific grades. Even the legendary fairy weapon didn't seem to have self-consciousness. But the reincarnation mirror and black lotus ring had it. Not only did they have it, but they were also full of intelligence and smarter than the human clan. Su Li shook her head and dispersed her thoughts. She was thinking too far. She turned her eyes to Su Yuanhai, who was waiting on the side. She pondered for a moment and asked, "Is there a treasure weapon?" Su Yuanhai couldn't help but smile bitterly. The head branch of the Su family may have it, but the 7th branch of the Su family is too weak. Su Li was not surprised to get this answer, nor was she disappointed. She took a handy spiritual sword and turned to the cupboard for storing elixir to take out 3 Dasheen grass. Su Yuanhai's face suddenly changed. "Master, Dasheen grass." Su Li put away the Dasheen grass and shook her hand. She said indifferently, "I know your worries. Don't worry. This thing will only be used on the people of Ni sect and will not be spread out." Su Yuanhai breathed a sigh of relief. "Master, you are wise. I was overthinking." Dasheen. Dasheen Su to be to Su, Su said. To say. To the Dasheen to the Su to Su. Ditto to Su. She. Family. She. Ancestor she to say that she dis Dasheen grass. She to say, the treasure to said. To. Su to, he Li to. To say, to, he. Next, Su Li strolled around the treasure house and didn't take anything else. It was hard to notice that there were few Dasheen grass in the treasure house. With Su Yuanhai, the traitor, it was almost impossible to find out. But if she took everything, it would be hard to say. Moreover, the things here would be hers sooner or later. There was no need to rush. Thinking of this, Su Li smiled and turned to leave. Su Yuanhai hurried to follow her. At the door of the treasure house, the 2 elders of the Su family were relieved to see Su Li's dissatisfied face and a flying sword in her hand. She was indeed a kid from a small sect. Her eyesight was not good. She just took a rubbish flying sword after strolling in the treasure house for so long. Although they had a sense of superiority in their hearts, they didn't show it on the surface. Instead, they came forward and told her kindly, "The tea party is around the corner. You have to refine this sword as soon as possible. Don't let us down." Su Li blushed as if she had been greatly encouraged. She nodded heavily. The 2 elders laughed happily at the same time. "Little kid, you are so gullible." At the same time, Su Li and Su Yuanhai didn't walk far. Su Yuanhai suddenly heard the girl beside him say, "Have the 2 elders of the Su family been guarding the door of the treasure house?" Su Yuanhai nodded, and his face gradually became serious. "Teacher, you suddenly mentioned it. Is there a spy among them?" Su Li shook her head, and a thoughtful look flashed in her eyes. "What method did 5th sister use to sneak into the treasure house?" "It's like the crafty art of passing through walls." "But where did Yu Sheng get that kind of crafty art?" She wanted to steal the resources of those low-level cultivators for a clear purpose. But she obviously couldn't use it herself, and she didn't have any juniors. The only possibility was, Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. Last time when she met her, she concealed her strength. The power of the reincarnation mirror is so terrible. Will it make people immersed in the illusion and obsession for a lifetime? Or will it dissipate one day? If it dissipates, will my obsession also? At this moment, Su Li thought very far. She had a very clear feeling that even if Yang Zai, Su Yusheng and others' obsession dissipated one day, she would not. Would the two of them do it? Which one? Do you mean Su Jojo? In the practice room, a square-faced young man in a fiery red robe waved his palms as he spoke. A bright red light shone between his hands, and he punched on the green-grey rock. Boom! Stone chips were flying. Many disciples who were watching from the practice room changed their expressions and dodged the flying stones. Although they were not hurt, many people were still scared and looked pale. The strength of the first senior fellow apprentice is even more terrifying. A casual punch has such power. The power of this move can even kill a practitioner in the middle stage of Jindan realm at will. Can a practitioner in the peak stage of Jindan realm have such strength? In the discussion, an elegant young man in a navy blue robe with a feminine demeanor shook his body twice and dodged all the stones. He smiled lightly. Yes, it's Su Jojo. The young man in red withdrew his hands and calmed down his fiery breath. His square face showed a calmness that was completely different from his fiery practice method. He frowned and said, "What do you want to do?" The elegant young man looked at him meaningfully. "Don't you feel awkward that there is an outsider among the disciples of the seventh branch?" The young man in red took a deep look at the elegant young man. After a moment of silence, he grinned and said, "Su Meng, don't bother me. If you want to drive Su Jojo away, do it yourself. I don't care about you." Su Meng's expression remained unchanged. He continued to smile playfully. "Su Fengchun, you are the strongest in our generation. I admit that I am inferior to you. But I'm afraid it's impossible for you to pass the tea party for immortals smoothly and reach the top in one step." "Why?" Su Fengchun stared at Su Meng. "Why beat around the bush? If you have something to say, just say it." Seeing that Su Fengchun was serious, Su Meng slowly stopped smiling. His lips moved, but no words came out. At this moment, Su Fengchun's expression changed wildly, and his firm mind trembled. Su Jojo is likely to be the illegitimate daughter of the head of the family. Who do you think he will recommend to go to the tea party? The practice room fell into a dead silence. After a long time, Su Fengchun's expression returned to indifference. He got up and walked to the adytum. Su Meng chuckled and followed him. The rest of the disciples were at a loss. They didn't know what had happened. They didn't hear Su Meng's voice. "Master, the date of the tea party for immortals has been set. It will be held in the Shunhong Taoist field of Yushu sect on the 8th of March. All the young geniuses of the 25 sects will be there." After Su Li practiced in the Su family for a few days, Su Yuanhai sent a light cyan invitation with a simple leaf painted on it. Su Li took it and put it away. Seeing that Su Yuanhai hadn't left, she asked, "Anything else?" Su Yuanhai's expression was uncertain. After a moment of silence, he knelt down and said with shame, "Please forgive me for my incompetence." Su Li raised her eyebrows. "What happened? Stand up and talk." "It's Su Fengchun and Su Meng." Su Yuanhai stood up with a red face. "They went to the head branch to complain when I wasn't paying attention. They said that I didn't distinguish between public and private affairs, opened the back door for you, and put the Su family in a disadvantageous position. I don't have any background in the head branch of the Su family." Su Fengchun and Su Meng made a good start, and the people there immediately took advantage of it. They changed the rules of the tea party for immortals. Su Yuanhai's face turned black, and he became angrier as he spoke. Originally, I only needed to take you to the tea party in Yushu sect on the 8th of March. Now, I have to participate in the cultivation competition within the Su family to decide the real candidate." Speaking of this, Su Yuanhai knelt down again. "It's obvious that they deliberately made things difficult for the 7th branch of the Su family and brought trouble to you. I deserve to die. Please punish me, master." Su Li didn't get angry, but smiled instead. Her eyes were shining. So, I still have a chance to go to the base camp of the Su family openly? Su Yuanhai raised his head and nodded blankly. Why did Master look so happy? Didn't you find it troublesome? Since it has come to this, then prepare well. It's just a little more trouble. Do you think I will be defeated by a group of juniors? Su Li waved her hand gently, and Su Yuanhai immediately stood up involuntarily. He said with reverence, "Of course I believe you, Master. I just want to trouble you, it's no trouble. Go and prepare well. By the way, where is Su Yosheng's yard?" Su Yuanhai was stunned again. Why did Master want to find the demoness? But it was obviously not something he could ask. He was self-conscious and left quietly after telling Su Li the specific yard. Chapter 4:18. In the wing room, Su Yusheng frowned and was thinking about what to do next. Suddenly, Yu's voice came from outside the door. "Miss, Su Jojo asks to see you." Su Jojo? Su Yusheng was slightly stunned. She was now the most senior member of the younger generation in the 7th branch of the Su family. Nothing could be hidden from her. She naturally knew who Su Jojo was. Why does the person Su Yuanhai likes come to see me? Su Yusheng was a little confused, but she still said, "Let her in." Squeak, the door was gently pushed open. A petite figure crossed the threshold and walked in. She turned around and closed the door. Seeing her back, Su Yusheng, who was absent-minded at first, suddenly fixed her eyes on the person. She stared at the person. Su Jojo? Or, Su Li turned around and chuckled, "I haven't seen you for 2 years. How are you, 5th sister?" "It's really you, sister," Su Yusheng said with joy. Suddenly, she thought of something. She set up a soundproof barrier in the room and asked nervously, "Sister, what's the matter with Su Jojo?" Su Li sensed the pneuma of Yuanying realm that burst out of Su Yusheng at that moment. She raised her eyebrows thoughtfully and said, "You should have guessed that I am Su Jojo." Su Yusheng held her breath and said hurriedly, "No, it's too risky. This tea party for immortals will be held in Yushu sect. There are many people who are familiar with you. If your identity is exposed, the consequences." "Yusheng, if I didn't expose my identity, how could you recognize me 2 years ago?" Su Li smiled. Her gentle voice calmed Su Yusheng down for a moment and restored her ability to think. Yes, her sister was now a reincarnated body. As long as she didn't expose herself, who could really recognize her? Thinking of this, Su Yusheng smiled bitterly. "Sister, the plan now is to stay dormant and restore your cultivation. It has only been 2 years. Why are you in such a hurry?" While she was persuading her sister, she also speculated the whole story. It turned out that her sister had been practicing in Ni sect all the time. But she couldn't figure out how she sneaked into the tea party for immortals with the help of Su Yuanhai. Others might not know, but she knew that Su Yuanhai had always been biased against his sect. It was unreasonable for him to suddenly recruit disciples from affiliated sects to participate in the tea party for immortals. Su Li looked at Su Yusheng quietly for a long time until the latter was scared. Then she said slowly, "Yusheng, your cultivation is not worse than Su Yuanhai's, even slightly higher, right?" Su Yusheng was slightly shocked. She didn't intend to hide it from Su Li. She scratched her head and said embarrassedly, "Sister, how do you know? I once obtained a book that concealed one's aura." As she said this, she suddenly stopped. She had set up a soundproofing barrier before. Could it be that that trace of aura had allowed her elder sister to see through her? Then big sister's current cultivation, Su Yusheng thought and quietly looked at Su Li, but found that Su Li was still the same as 2 years ago, like a mortal who had not yet begun to practice. She heard from Yu that Su Jojo had the cultivation of the peak of Jindan realm. Could it be? Su Yusheng thinks a lot in an instant. She can cultivate to gathering vitality in just over 1,000 years. Of course, she is not stupid. Good concealment method. No wonder the whole 7th branch of Su family doesn't know your real cultivation. Su Li looked at Su Yusheng, who was thoughtful and knew that she had guessed something. But she didn't care and continued, I didn't care about your aura last time. In this way, it is more convenient. Do you remember what I said 2 years ago? Su Yusheng looked at Su Li in a daze. Even though she knew that her elder sister was careful and hid it from her for safety, she inevitably felt bitter and cold when she thought that she almost stole the Su family's treasure house in order to collect Su Li's cultivation resources over the years. Su Li shook her head and laughed. Her voice was sincere. It's my fault this time. Don't steal things from the treasure house again. Although your magic treasure is magical, it can't prevent people from probing. You can't take risks. Do you understand? Su Yosheng's face suddenly turned red when she heard this. It turned out that her elder sister knew everything. Then she didn't have to feel wronged. Taking a deep breath, the bitterness in Su Yosheng's heart dissipated, and a smile appeared on her face. Of course I remember what you said. One day, I will take charge of Su family and follow your orders. On the first day of March, Su Yuanhai took Su Li and the other two to the head branch of Su family. They didn't encounter any difficulties and settled in the guest room smoothly. Soon after settling in, Su Li saw Su Yuanhai leave the guest room with a gloomy face. He was probably summoned by the head branch. The second Tianyu lotus of Su family should be ripe. I missed the first one in my previous life. I can't miss it this time. Su Li muttered to herself. Sitting on the ground, she pretended to be bored and drew circles. But her psychic awareness quietly spread out and penetrated into the ground. The psychic awareness cultivated by others was extremely difficult to penetrate the soil wall even if it transformed into the divine awareness. But Su Li found that she was different. She didn't feel any hindrance, as if both the ground and the wall were illusory. Su Li guessed that the mutation of her psychic awareness probably came from the body of evil ghost. But the Black Lotus was still asleep after absorbing the Soul Stone for 2 years, so she couldn't find anyone to ask. Halfway through the exploration, Su Li sensed that the underground spiritual power was gathering in one place. She was about to release more psychic awareness into the underground. Suddenly, she sensed 2 gazes. Su Jojo. Su Li recalled all her psychic awareness instantly. She looked up and saw 2 young men standing at the door. She glanced at them and asked with a smile, Su Fengchun? Su Meng. Although Su Fengchun didn't look happy, he still nodded. But Su Meng said coldly, you are just a disciple of an affiliated sect. You don't kneel when you see us and dare to call my name directly. Do you know your crime? Know my crime? Su Li raised her eyebrows. She really couldn't arouse the interest of these 2 who were not even the top among practitioners of Jindan realm. But sometimes, there were always some people who didn't know how to write the word death. If you have time to show off in front of me, you'd better practice, so that you won't be eliminated tomorrow and shoot yourself in the foot. Su Li replied indifferently. She didn't look at Su Meng who was in a rage. Instead, she turned to stare at Su Fengchun and said bluntly, although you are at the peak of Jindan realm, I'm afraid that you can't even enter the top 21 among the disciples of the Su family. The Tea Party for Immortals is of great importance. Each branch of the Su family sends 3 people to participate in the Tea Party, which is a kind of protection for the weaker branches. But this time, it was destroyed by you. Do you know how many heads of branches want to kill you? Huh. After hearing this, Su Fengchuan's gloomy face instantly turned pale, and his forehead was covered with sweat. Su Meng, who was about to lose his temper, felt a chill in his heart as if a basin of cold water had been poured on him. How could this be? They didn't expect this at all. Now that Su Li pointed it out, they immediately felt a sense of crisis. If the heads of the other 5 branches really vented their anger on them, would Su Yuanhai help them? Even if he was willing, could he stop them? Su Li waved her hand and sighed, go back and think about how to save your life. I really don't know what you are thinking about now that you still have time to trouble me. Su Fengchun and Su Meng were a little confused. They left in a daze, full of worries. The moment the head changed the rules, they felt something was wrong, as if they were also trapped. But they never thought that the situation would be so serious. The head didn't mention it to me. Is it because he is too disappointed with us? Has he given up on me? Su Fengchun and Su Meng both thought the worst. The more they thought about it, the worse they felt. They didn't notice the trap in Su Li's words. The strength gap between practitioners at the peak of Jindan realm was not big. If the Su family could really find 21 practitioners at the peak of Jindan realm, Yushu sect would have been pulled down from the position of the first sect. Su Li smiled. These two people were still too young. They were deceived by her in a few words. It was good for them to be stupid, so as to avoid trouble for her. In the evening, Su Yuanhai returned to the courtyard of the guest room. He glanced at Su Fengchun and Su Meng's room, which was still lit. He didn't care about it and turned to Su Li's room. Before he reached the door, he heard a voice in his mind. Push the door open and come in. The door is not closed. Su Yuanhai remained calm and entered the room as Su Li said. Su Fengchun and Su Meng were more discouraged when they saw this scene. Su Fengchun regretted and even hated Su Meng. If it weren't for his idea to search, how could he fall into such an embarrassing situation? At this moment, Su Yuanhai was reporting the situation in Su Li's room. Master, things are much better than I thought. Su Yuanhai was relaxed. This time the head branch suddenly changed the rules, which also affected the interests of other branches. After some debate, the head branch had to make a concession and adopt a random drawing system tomorrow. The head branch will send 4 teams, and the second branch and the third branch will send 3 teams each. 14 teams will fight against each other. The winner will stay, and the loser will leave. Su Li nodded, that is to say, as long as we are lucky enough to meet a weak team, we can easily win. Exactly. Su Li showed a thoughtful expression. The foundation of the first 3 branches of the Su family was completely different from that of the last 4 branches. They sent more people, and almost all the participants were second-rate disciples. If the last 4 branches couldn't win, they couldn't say anything. In general, the last 4 branches still suffered losses. The 7 branches of the Su family are not united. It is a good thing for me to deepen the contradiction this time. In this way, the 2 boys hit the right target and helped me. Su Li shook off the thought and didn't think more. She didn't care about the so-called internal selection at all. Tianyu Lotus was the most important thing. Keep an eye on me at night. No matter who is looking for me, stop him. In addition, give me the internal safety route of the head branch. Su Li gave a series of orders, and Su Yuanhai agreed repeatedly. He didn't ask any more questions and left after giving the route map to Su Li. After getting the route map, Su Li took off the heavy soul robe, and her spirit and physical body immediately got rid of the shackles. The Grand Elder of the Su family was in Huishan realm, so she naturally needed to deal with him carefully. Seeing that the night was getting darker, she didn't delay any longer. She turned into a black shadow and rushed to the detected location along the safe route. Chapter 419. At night, Su Li walked openly on the path near the herb garden in the back mountain of the Su family. There were many tactical matrices in the mansion of the head family. Even the people of the Su family couldn't go out safely without a road map. So, Su Li didn't see many patrolling disciples along the way. The Su family would never expect that Su Yuanhai, the head of the 7th branch, would be controlled and leak the safety route. Of course, it was not difficult for Su Li to pass through these tactical matrices with her level of tactical matrix, but she didn't have enough time. She had only 1 night to participate in the so-called selection battle tomorrow. A moment later, the path came to an end. Sensing the numbers of 2 practitioners of Yuanying realm not far in front of her, Su Li hid her figure and blended into the night. A cave brightly illuminated by lights came into view. At the entrance of the cave, 2 elders of Yuanying realm sat quietly on the ground and spread their divine awareness around. Not to mention a living person, even a mosquito would not be let in. It's heavily guarded. Su Li narrowed her eyes and quietly stepped back for a distance. Then she took out a cloak magic weapon from the universe ring. Cloak of earth element. As long as it was activated by the power of the soul, it could freely shuttle through the rocks and soil. It was extremely wonderful. Needless to say, the origin of this thing was needless to say. Since Su Yuanhai said that they could go to the head branch of the Su family, Su Li borrowed this magic weapon from Su Yusheng. Her soul was much stronger than Su Yusheng's, so she could use it freely after getting familiar with it. So what if 2 Yuanying realm are guarding dogs? With a smile, Su Li put on the cloak and blended into the ground. At this moment, she was surprisingly similar to Su Yusheng's behavior when she stole the treasure house last time. However, the value of the natural treasure in the cave might be much higher than the whole treasure house of the 7th branch of the Su family. She blended into the ground less than 10 feet deep. Su Li kept going along the direction of the cave and occasionally heard footsteps coming from above. There are also people patrolling the passage. In the darkness, Su Li smiled coldly. After 1,000 years, it's time to return it to its original owner. With a single thought, her soul poured into the cloak. Her speed immediately increased as she drilled into the depths of the underground cave. After a while, the passage began to slope down, and the soil became more and more humid. Su Li, wrapped in a cloak, didn't care about it, and her speed didn't decrease. After a few breaths, she suddenly stopped, and almost touched a crystal purple root. At this time, there was a faint conversation above her head. "We've arrived." A sharp light flashed in Su Li's eyes, but she operated the all-spirits tactics to the extreme, and wrapped it in the cloak. She was motionless, like a silent stone in the ground. The conversation gradually became clear. "Tianyu lotus is about to ripen. Su Huanji, do you dare to say that you have no other thoughts? Hehe, 4th brother, you're talking nonsense. Who dares to rob Su Huanli's things? He won't care whose offspring we are. Even if he kills us, the elders will just turn a blind eye. Let's wait for the Tianyu lotus to mature and inform him. Don't have any evil thoughts." The person who was called 4th brother immediately became silent. After a long time, he coldly snorted in dissatisfaction and became silent. Su Li heard the conversation between the two and thought. These 2 people were not old, but their cultivation was not weak. After a little investigation, she found that they were at least in the middle stage of Yuanying realm. No wonder they were interested in the Tianyu lotus. But Su Huanli was in the half-step Huishan realm, and the Tianyu lotus was more useful to him. Maybe it could help him break through directly and let the Su family have one more grand elder. "Gee, Mingjing lotus." Suddenly, a surprised voice sounded in the awareness sea. Su Li blinked her eyes. "Have you absorbed all the soul stones?" As soon as the thought came out, Su Li sensed that black lotus ring reappeared on her finger, and its color was deeper than before. "Of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the energy to talk to you. But as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw the Mingjing lotus. Gee, your cloak is also not simple. It seems that you have a lot of luck in the past 2 years. Can you get me some more soul stones?" Black Lotus, whose injury had slightly recovered, was obviously a little inflated. Su Li was not in the mood to deal with him for the time being, and asked bluntly, "You said that this thing was called Mingjing lotus in ancient times? Now it is Tianyu lotus, which can make people enter the empty mirror, and the perception of the half-step Huishan realm has a chance to break through to the real Huishan realm and reach the top of Jojo region." Black Lotus laughed and said, "You're right. This treasure is indeed helpful for breaking through to Huishan realm, but if it is really used to break through the mirror, it is undoubtedly a reckless waste of God's gift. Then what should I use it for?" Su Li frowned slightly. If Black Lotus didn't say it, she would probably use Tianyu lotus for breaking through to the half-step Huishan realm. "Little Su Li, you are still a little stupid." Black Lotus slept for a while and seemed to forget the fear of being threatened by Su Li at that time. He crazily said, "Aren't you practicing the swordsmanship of Tsuashing that I gave you? Which sword move have you practiced now? You should have 3 sword moves in 2 years, right?" Su Li nodded. "The 9th sword move is perfect." "What do you want to say?" Black Lotus nodded with relief, and then suddenly felt something wrong. He almost thought that he had heard it wrong, and couldn't help but ask, "Wait, how many sword moves did you say?" Su Li said indifferently, "You didn't hear it wrong. The 9th sword move." Crack. Black Lotus ring couldn't turn anymore. It disappeared from Su Li's finger and hid in a corner of her body, shivering. 3 sword moves in 2 years. No one could do it in ancient times. Damn. 9 sword moves in 2 years. Did I really only sleep for 2 years, not 200 years? 2,000 years? How could it be so fast? Black Lotus fell into serious self-doubt and was very sad and indignant. Is I really going to be defeated by this girl? Seeing Black Lotus ring hiding, Su Li didn't care and concentrated on waiting for the opportunity. After a while, there was a fluctuation in Su Li's eyes. The two people talked again. Third brother, I just don't want to. Why? Why does Su Huanli always practice faster than us? We were the ones who ate the treasure in those years. Su Huani, shut up. Do you know what you are talking about? Third brother, don't pretend. There is no one else here. What's wrong with me talking about it? There are not many pieces of meat on the treasure. After a long time, there are only more than 20 pieces of meat. We divided them equally in those years. Logically speaking, our cultivation speed should be the same, but Su Huanli is faster than us. Third brother, don't you doubt anything? The older man stopped talking, but his breath was much heavier. Obviously, he was extremely uncalm inside. At that time, we ate it until its bones were white. But after a few months, its meat grew up. If we were bold enough to dig a few more pieces at that time, maybe Su Huanli would do it. Is it useful to say this now? He has been dead for 1,000 years, but you still can't forget it. I just don't want to. The treasure belongs to our Su family. Why should we let those bastards of Yushu sect take advantage of it? Damn it. It's a taboo for Su family to embezzle the flesh and blood of the treasure. If that person is not dead and no evidence is found by the powerful figures of holy sects, we will definitely be in big trouble. In the future, we'd better not say this kind of words. I know. I have a sense of propriety. You don't have to envy him. In the past 1,000 years, Su Huanli's cultivation has advanced too fast. He has an evil talent and has been targeted by many people. With him in front of us, our pressure will be much less. You are optimistic. The man snorted and said no more. Under the ground, Su Li's pupils were deep and her face was full of anger. Originally, she just wanted to take away what belonged to her, but now, she changed her mind. She shook her shoulders slightly, and the black cat fell down. It opened its eyes and looked at Su Li with a confused look. In front of the Tianyu lotus pond, 2 middle-aged men sat absent-mindedly on one side with their legs crossed. They didn't notice a strange change in the surrounding space. The older middle-aged practitioner vaguely felt something was wrong. His psychic awareness scanned the catacombs, but found nothing. He thought he was too nervous, so he was about to withdraw his psychic awareness. Suddenly, the surface of the catacombs shook slightly, as if a heavy object fell. The brothers of the Su family immediately changed their expressions and stood up. The triangular-eyed man in a black and purple Taoist robe said seriously, "Fourth brother, did you feel it?" Another middle-aged man with a broad face nodded almost imperceptibly. His eyes scanned the surroundings. That vibration was definitely not an illusion. Is it possible that there is a grand elder practicing in the sky above the ground in the middle of the night? The triangular-eyed man still didn't think it was the problem in the catacombs. He was about to walk around and look around. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of him without warning. The 2 brothers of the Su family were shocked and retreated subconsciously. But halfway, they found that it was a very cute black cat in front of them. Su Huani was instantly confused. What happened? A cat suddenly appeared in the middle of the night. How did the cat get in? Where were the people outside? Guards. Su Huanji was a little older. Although the cat in front of him didn't seem to be harmful, he was ready to summon people and treat it cautiously. Unfortunately, they missed the best opportunity when they were in a daze. Guards. Guards. Guards, the voice echoed in the catacombs. Su Huanji waited for a long time, but he didn't see anyone coming in from outside. At this moment, the 2 finally changed their expressions and shot out at the same time. But halfway, the scene in front of them changed. When they looked back, they actually returned to the original place. The tactical matrix is at least above the 9th grade. Su Huanji's face became more and more gloomy. When was it set up? Did the black cat distract us for a moment? Third brother. Su Huani shouted. Su Huanji suddenly raised his head and suddenly saw a looming figure of a girl approaching slowly. On her shoulder, the black cat yawned and showed disdain. I have a master. You two scumbags. You are not friendly. Su Huanji's heart thumped, but he pretended to be calm on the surface. He cupped his hands and said, Why did you come here? This is the secret place of our Su family. If you leave now, I just want to ask you one question. Su Li opened her red lips slightly. What is the treasure animal? Or, who is it? Chapter 420. The two brothers of the Su family were slightly shocked. Their previous conversation was heard by this woman. Don't talk. Su Li approached them slowly. She said in a casual tone, but she exuded a strong pressure. Then let me guess. The so-called treasure animal is the holy girl Su Li, right? Hearing this, Su Huanji and Su Huani's pupils suddenly shrank. Damn it. This matter can't be leaked. Kill her. The two brothers' eyes were red. They didn't need to communicate. Without saying a word, they attacked with all their strength. Two precious flying swords pierced at Su Li's face in an instant. They scratched the air and made a harsh sound. Go to hell. At this moment, Su Li waved her palm lightly. A layer of transparent barrier appeared in front of her. The two flying swords pierced it and made a crisp sound. The barrier immediately burst, and the flying swords couldn't move forward. Did you stop it? What tactical matrix is this? Su Huani's expression changed slightly, and then he said fiercely, You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you be presumptuous in front of me in Zhuji realm? I will let you know that the tactical matrix is not omnipotent. He turned his palm and threw out a transparent round stone glowing with blue light. Melt. The round stone turned into water in the blink of an eye and melted into the ground. The successful tactical matrix for camouflage immediately shook, and the hole leading to the outside loomed. Seeing this, Su Huanji immediately seized the opportunity to pinch the sword formula and was about to cut off Su Li's head. But seeing that the girl in front of him didn't panic or despair, he faintly felt that something was wrong. Bang! As expected, the flying sword was blocked again in the next moment. This time, it was not a tactical matrix shield, but Su Li's hand. The incomparably sharp treasured flying sword was actually easily pinched by this girl. She was not in Zhuji realm at all. Su Huanji was shocked. He tried his best to drive the flying sword to break free. His face turned red, but the flying sword didn't move at all. Third brother, let me help you. Su Huani shouted. Su Huanji was a little moved. When he turned back, he saw his fourth brother rushing out without looking back. He didn't want to help him at all. Su Huani. Su Huanji roared. Seeing that Su Huani was about to break through the tactical matrix for camouflage, Su Li suddenly loosened her fingers and sighed, The Su family is so boring. Before he finished his words, Su Huanji's flying sword trembled and suddenly disappear. The next moment, Su Huanji saw his flying sword appear behind Su Huani silently. The arrow pierced through Su Huani's heart and the nascent soul in his heart. Third brother, you want to kill me? Looking at the flying sword in front of his chest, Su Huani was at a loss. When he turned around, he saw Su Huanji spitting out blood and looking shocked. Before he could find the answer, Su Huanji collapsed to the ground. His breathing gradually weakened, and a pool of red gradually spread along the wound. The night is still young. Since you want to die early, I will fulfill your wish. Su Li's eyes were indifferent. She moved her fingers, and the flying sword and Su Huani's universe ring flew into her hand. Seeing this scene, Su Huanji's body trembled uncontrollably. The woman in front of him was definitely not at the level of laying foundation. She even erased the control of his flying sword in an instant and forcibly refined it into her possession. Was she above the Huishan realm? Boom! The surrounding nothingness vibrated, and the tactical matrix stabilized again. Su Li's eyes were fixed, and she summoned the magic treasure which had returned to a blue ball. After a rough look, she put it away and looked at Su Huanji. She also had a preliminary definition of her own strength. My strength should be far beyond the middle stage of Yuanying realm now. No matter what kind of strange skills Su Huani has, I will kill all the people like him, Su Li calculated in her heart. The so-called strength could break all kinds of skills. Su Huani died with some grievances. The space in the catacombs was too small. It was a tragedy that a weak practitioner like him couldn't keep a distance from Su Li. Of course, even in a spacious place, Su Huani still couldn't escape death. The ending was the same. It was just a matter of time. If I used Suashing, can I defeat a practitioner in Huashan realm? Su Li couldn't help thinking. The biggest obstacle in front of her was cultivation. If a practitioner in Huashan realm could no longer threaten her, everything would be solved. Well, it's not suitable to fight tonight. Dispersing the thought, Su Li raised her head and looked at Su Huanji, who was looking at her with vigilance not far away. She said lightly, "Answer my question." Su Huanji looked bitter. "Senior, since you already have the answer, why ask again?" Su Li's eyes flickered. "I want to hear it from your Su family." Su Huanji sighed. "If I tell you, can you spare my life?" "Yes." Su Li's answer was very simple, which made Su Huanji suspicious. But he had no other choice. Answering the question was the only chance to survive. How could he not seize it? Yes, the precious animal is Su Li, the holy girl of Yushu sect. Su Li looked at him quietly and asked again, "Why do you call her precious animal?" "That's because," Su Huanji hesitated for a while, and finally gritted his teeth and confessed, "Su Li's flesh and blood have the effect of enhancing luck. When we were young, we all cut off a piece of her flesh and blood. Then, we had many adventures and our cultivation soared. So that the 5 of us all reached the middle stage of Yuanying realm in just 2,000 years. Who are the 5 of the Su family? What about their strength?" A smile appeared on Su Li's face, which made Su Huanji feel cold in his heart. He didn't dare to think more and quickly replied, "One has been killed by you. The rest are Su Huanli, Su Huanwen, Su Huanwu, and me. The 5 of us are the direct descendants of the Su family. Among them, Su Huanli is the youngest and the 5th, but he is the strongest. He is in the half-step of Huashan realm. Su Huanwen and Su Huanwu are a pair of twins. Their cultivation is in the late stage of Yuanying realm and they have practiced the secret skill of one mind." A moment ago, Su Huanji was still indignant about Su Huani's betrayal. But now, he revealed the details of the other 3 like pouring beans in a bucket. Su Li looked at Su Huanji, who was still talking, and sighed, "So your Su family is really boring." Su Huanji held his breath and said with a little panic, "Senior, who are you? If you have grudges with my Su family, why do you blame me, a junior? I can leave the Su family in the future. Please forgive me. You swallowed my flesh and blood, and you want me to forgive you?" Su Li suddenly interrupted him. Su Huanji was stunned and then his face changed dramatically. "Su," whoosh. The precious flying sword flew over his head and neatly cut Su Huanji into 2 halves. His Yuanying was also dismembered. "Here comes the retribution. Su Huanli, I will wait for you down there, ha ha ha." Su Huanji's last words shook in the nothingness, and then his body was separated and turned into a pool of dead flesh. "Finally, it's quiet." Su Li murmured softly and patted the nightmare on her shoulder to let it swallow the 2 bodies and lick the blood clean. Then she walked slowly to the Tianyu lotus pond. Black Lotus Ring appeared quietly. Looking at the nightmare who was still licking the ground, his teeth were chattering, "The first move of Tsuashing, and the power is converged to the extreme and the power is concentrated in one point. This girl's physical body has skyrocketed, but she can still completely control her own power. If she understands the sword intent." Black Lotus shook his head and didn't dare to think about it. He sighed, "Her resentment is so deep." Tianyu Lotus. Walking to the pond, Su Li's eyes were bright. "Black Lotus, take away the pond." Black Lotus was tempted. He immediately released a force to take the whole pond and the underground soil into the ring. He didn't forget to mutter, How do you know that I have a space to store living things? If not, how did you take me out of the reincarnation mirror? Su Li's words made Black Lotus speechless. With a flash of light in her hand, the cloak reappeared. It's time to go. There is no need to confront the Grand Elder of the Su family now. The quiet night was suddenly broken by a roar. Bastard, damn it. Boom. The ground shook violently. Su Yuanhai had been waiting for Su Li and didn't meditate. He was slightly shocked when he heard the roar. That's the voice of the old ancestor of the Su family. Master hasn't come back yet. A trace of worry flashed in his eyes. When he was about to get up, he suddenly heard a transmitted sound. I'm back. Have a good rest. Don't give yourself away tomorrow. Phew, Su Yuanhai was relieved and turned back to sit on the futon. As long as he was not exposed, everything was fine. At this moment, in Su Li's room, Black Lotus couldn't help but say after he carefully placed the Qianyu lotus, you have to find a suitable place to replant the Qianyu lotus. I can't keep it here for a long time. I have refined 90% of the Kang Lei's cave. Wait for 1 more month. Black Lotus shut up immediately. So, she had already planned it. After a moment of silence, Black Lotus thought of something and asked again, how do you know that there is a Qianyu lotus under the ground of the Su family? It's so far away. Even if your spiritual awareness as an evil ghost is born with the ability to penetrate, you shouldn't be so bored to go so far. My spiritual awareness is born with the ability to penetrate. You didn't tell me. Su Li said quietly. Black Lotus was confused. Didn't I tell you? He recalled carefully and found that he didn't tell her. You are still disloyal. You are still on guard against me. Su Li said again. I didn't. Black Lotus exploded immediately. Then think about how to compensate me this time. It can't be worse than Tsuashing's. Black Lotus's face darkened. No. What I gave you last time were the best mental methods and secret methods. I don't believe it. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I know. You can give it to me after I master it all. It's always good to have more skills. After a while, Black Lotus finally calmed down. He rolled his eyes and said, don't think that I will forget you when you change the topic. How did you know the news about the Qianyu lotus? Su Li smiled. It's not a big deal. I didn't intend to change the topic. Black Lotus was so tired that he didn't want to talk anymore. Who couldn't see such an obvious thing? Did he really think that Black Lotus was blind? Chapter 421. Well, it's not a secret. Qianyu lotus is mine. While refining the Kang Lei's cave, Su Li explained, I got 2 at that time, but I was targeted by the Su family, who threatened me with the safety of the master. After I escorted the master back to the sect, I went straight to the Su family. Although the Su family had the big tactical matrix for the protection of the sect, the one that bloomed was destroyed by me. This one was a seedling 1,000 years ago. It seemed that the Su family had spent a lot of effort on it to make it bloom in just 1,000 years. More than a lot. Black Lotus heard the riot outside and sighed. The spiritual power needed for Qianyu lotus to bloom is no less than that needed for you to break through the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. The Grand Elder of the Su family must be mad because of you. Su Li held her chin. So, I didn't lose anything. Although she got 2 in her previous life, the one that bloomed only had 4 petals and was not very effective. She couldn't cultivate the remaining seedling with her ability at that time. Of course not. Black Lotus rolled his eyes. The Su family is the one who has lost both their children and their soldiers. Did this girl forget that in addition to Qianyu lotus, the 2 lineal disciples who were expected to reach Huashan realm were also killed by her? The lifespan of practitioners in Jindan realm was 4,999 years. A practitioner in Yuanying realm who was just over 2,000 years old was really young. Before dawn the next day, Su Yuanhai was called away by the head branch. He didn't come back with a sullen face until the internal selection contest of the Su family was about to begin. Su Li and the other 2 had been waiting at the gate of the yard. Su Yuanhai's eyes flashed when he saw them. He said in a low voice, Get ready and follow me to the contest. Whoever loses will get half of the cultivation resources. Su Fengchun and Su Meng looked bitter and said yes helplessly. Su Yuanhai snorted coldly and led everyone to the contest field. Meanwhile, he secretly transmitted the sound to Su Li. Master, you have a good foresight. The old ancestor really suspected us. But he couldn't vent his anger on us after checking our universe rings. Su Li nodded imperceptibly and didn't say anything. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai didn't delay any longer and quickened his pace. A moment later, he led the three into the gate of the martial arts practice field. As soon as she entered the door, Su Li saw that 6 of the 7 seats on the sidelines were occupied. They were the last to arrive. You're finally here? It was these 2 brats who came up with this rotten idea. Someone snorted coldly. Dozens of people in the field looked at them at the same time. 10% of them were looking at Su Li, and the other 90% were looking at Su Fengchun and Su Meng. Su Fengchun and Su Yuanhai had never experienced such a battle. Their faces were pale. If it weren't for Su Yuanhai, they would have knelt down long ago. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai pulled a long face and couldn't help but curse in a low voice, "What a disgrace. Come with me to the table." "Oh, yes, yes." Like waking up from a dream, Su Fengchun and Su Yuanhai blushed and hid behind Su Yuanhai dejectedly. They came to the last seat and sat down. From the beginning to the end, Su Li's expression didn't change, as if she was living in her own world. The leader of the second branch was a female practitioner in a blue gauze dress. She had a pretty face and looked no more than 30 years old. Seeing this scene, she couldn't help but chuckle. They can't even bear the stare. It's not surprising that they would do such a stupid thing because their state of mind is too poor. But Su Jojo has a firm state of mind. She is a promising talent. No wonder Su Yuanhai abandoned his sectarian prejudice and insisted on taking her to the tea party for immortals. Speaking of this, a steward of the main branch beside her couldn't help but remind, head of the second branch, the head of the family is angry. Don't let him hear you. So what? Hearing this, the woman smiled carelessly, but withdrew her gaze. Sitting next to Su Yuanhai, Su Li sensed that the stare disappeared. She looked up and inadvertently saw the female practitioner in blue. She looked no more than 30 years old, but her pneuma was far beyond Su Yuanhai's. She had reached the late stage of Yuanying realm, or even the peak. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai transmitted the sound consciously. Su Daiyin is a hidden genius of the second branch of the Su family. She is no more than 1,500 years old, but her cultivation is unfathomable. It is said that she is preparing for Huishan realm. Didn't she go to the reincarnation mirror 1,000 years ago? Su Li asked. Su Yuanhai replied helplessly, at that time, not every genius participated in it. Su Daiyin was one of them. I don't know the specific reason. While the two were communicating in private, an ordinary elder of the main branch walked to the giant arena with a radius of hundreds of meters in the middle. His voice resounded through the whole arena through the power of Yuanying realm. The tea party for immortals is coming. Only the strong can get the biggest chance. If you don't want to fall behind, you have to fight hard. Now, the representative disciples of each branch come up to draw lots to decide the order of the competition. Probably because Tianyu Lotus was stolen, the seat of the head of the main branch was vacant. The usual lengthy speech was gone, leaving only a brief and vague explanation. As soon as he finished his words, one person from each branch stood up, and Su Li also stood up and walked to the field. Seeing this, the rest of the branches felt a little uncomfortable, but if it was the other two, forget it. Su Jojo was better. The elder held the lot pot and stood in the center. Looking at the 14 people who came to the center of the arena, he warned, "Don't cheat with your cultivation. If I find out, you will be disqualified from the tea party immediately." The 14 people agreed and stepped forward in turn. When it was Su Li's turn, Black Lotus Ring appeared quietly and fiddled with the lot pot secretly. "Take it." Su Li took it out decisively and took it out to have a look. Lot number 3. She looked up and saw a young man in the middle stage of Jindan realm also holding lot number 3 in his hand. He stared at the lot in Su Li's hand with a bitter face and sighed. They were the third team put together temporarily by the third branch of Su family. They came here to make up the number. No matter who chose them, they would win for sure. Although the seventh branch of Su family was weak, they couldn't deal with it. Seeing this, the 4 representatives of the last 4 branches couldn't help but show a trace of envy and strong jealousy. What kind of luck did Su Jojo have? How could she draw it? Su Yuanhai was overjoyed and clenched his fists tightly. You deserve to be master. You can still cheat on such an occasion. Yesterday, Su Li specially asked him which team was the weakest. After he told Su Li, she got it today. If it was a coincidence, Su Yuanhai would be the first to not believe it. Holding lot number 3, Su Li stood aside and waited for the drawing to finish, regardless of what others thought. Little Su Li, you are too degrading. You let me do such a shameful thing. If I am found out, won't you and I lose our reputation? A piece of soul stone as hush money. Otherwise, when you become a mighty in the future, I will publicize this matter everywhere. Su Li's expression remained indifferent, but the corner of her eyes twitched slightly. Black Lotus was too inflated after he woke up. She had to find time to fix him. Taking a deep breath, Su Li's thought turned into a booming sound and was transmitted into Black Lotus Ring. If you say one more word, no matter how many soul stones you have in the future, I won't leave a piece for you. Swish. All the sounds stopped abruptly, and the awareness sea returned to silence, as if there had never been any sound. Su Li breathed a sigh of relief. It was finally quiet. Except for herself and Black Lotus, no one knew who took the Tianyu Lotus, and it was impossible to suspect her. But nothing was absolute. If there was an accident, it would be quite difficult for her to escape from the mansion of the head branch, and she would have to expose something. So, the more low-key, the better. The third team of the third branch of Su family was the most suitable candidate. In the space of Black Lotus Ring, Black Lotus sat quietly beside the pond of Tianyu Lotus, staring at the slightly withered flower bud in the pond. How could he not know Su Li's thoughts? Since Su Li's rebirth, her combat capability had been restored to the late stage of Yuaning realm in just a few years. It seemed to be very smooth, but in fact, every step she took had to be carefully calculated. Even though the two of them didn't say it out loud, both of them clearly understood that they were unable to act without fear, nor were they able to fight to their heart's content and in the open. Because they couldn't afford the consequences of failure. I can't take risks. But it must be dangerous for you to go to the tea party for immortals. If I can recover a little more soul power, maybe. Black Lotus was worried. In the outside world, Su Li sat calmly in the seat, watching the collision of spiritual power in the arena and the fierce battle expressionlessly. The number 3 battle was arranged at the end by drawing lots, which meant that she could go to the arena last. This day was destined to be boring. She just sat there, doing nothing but meditating on the 10th move of Tsuashing occasionally. Su Fengchun and Su Meng also relaxed a lot. They had lost all their faces, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Besides, Su Jojo had drawn the weakest team, so it was a sure thing that they would go to the tea party for immortals. The sun was setting in the blink of an eye. Ah! After a scream, blood spilled on the arena. The young man in the Taoist uniform of the head branch put away his flying sword and turned away without looking at the disciple of the 6th branch whose arms were cut off by him. The face of the 6th branch Su's master was so ugly that it looked like it was about to drip water. In the past, he could take his disciples to see the world even if he didn't get anything from the tea party for immortals. But this time, they drew the seeded team of the head branch. It was impossible for them to advance. Su Yuanhai. The head of the 6th branch suddenly turned his head and stared at Su Yuanhai. At this time, he couldn't help but wonder if it was a deal between the 7th branch and the head branch. Otherwise, how could it be explained that the weakest 7th branch drew an even weaker team? The probability was too small. Su Yuanhai sensed the gaze, turned his head, and grinned. What can I do for you, 6th brother? The head of the 6th branch snorted and turned his head. At this time, The voice of the elder of the head branch finally sounded. The last match, number 3 match. Both sides, come on. Su Yuanhai ignored the head of the 6th branch and glanced at the direction of the 3rd branch. He pondered for a moment and said, Su Meng, you go. Su Meng knew that his cultivation was the weakest among the 3, so he was not surprised. He took a deep breath and walked onto the arena. The other side was relieved to see that it was Su Meng who fought. They had no choice but to send a disciple in the middle stage of Jindan realm to fight. All 3 in the team were in the middle stage of Jindan realm, so the result would be the same. After the 2 saluted, they kept a distance from each other. After a lukewarm fight, the 3rd branch's body movement was not as good as Su Meng's. In the end, he was defeated because of his serious injury. I didn't expect that Su Meng had some skills. His body movement has reached the nuance realm. Many people recognized Su Meng's body movement realm and were secretly surprised. The contempt in their hearts was reduced a little. Su Meng's body was steaming. He panted for a moment and walked off the arena. He had consumed more than half of his genuine qi. Continuous fights would only hurt him, which was not worth the loss. Feng-chun. Su Yuanhai said in a low voice when he saw Su Meng coming down. Su Feng-chun, who had long been impatient, stood up immediately and strode to the center of the arena. The Pneuma of Jindan realm, which was close to completion, was released. The peak of Jindan realm. Many people's hearts sank slightly. After the joke, they realized that the 7th branch was not weak. There were 2 practitioners in the peak of Jindan realm. Although Su Meng's strength was a little weaker, he was faster and had a strong ability to protect himself. A moment later, the disciple of the 3rd branch also came to the arena. He cupped his hands and said, I am still young and can't defeat you, senior fellow apprentice. But I don't want to admit defeat. Please fight with me. Su Feng-chun grinned. Did he take him as a target to sharpen himself? Chapter 422. Boom. The hot pneuma burst out from his body without warning, full of explosive feeling like magma. In the blink of an eye, the disciple of the 3rd branch in front of him was blown out of the arena. Too weak, Su Feng-chun shook his head and said in an arrogant tone, Nex. Is this the embryonic form of the true meaning of fire? The moment Su Feng-chun released his pneuma, everyone, including the elder in charge of the main family, changed their expressions slightly and had the same thought in mind. Su Yuanhai was also stunned. Then, instead of being surprised, his face turned ugly. He could defeat the enemy with one hand, but he had to expose his trump card. Wasn't he an idiot? And in this way, Mr. Su's situation, the peak stage of Jindan realm grasped the embryonic form of the true meaning. His comprehension is good, but his temperament, in the seat of the 2nd branch, Su Daiyin shook her head and couldn't help but look at Su Jojo in the seat of the 7th branch, who always looked indifferent. Sometimes the order could reflect a lot of things. Su Feng-chun understood the embryonic form of the true meaning, but he was still not as good as Su Jojo in Su Yuanhai's mind. So, how strong was Su Jojo? At this moment, not only Su Daiyin thought of this, but many people in the field, either overtly or covertly, focused on Su Li. Su Li frowned slightly. Trouble. At this time, Su Feng-chun walked down from the arena with a smile on his face. The 3rd opponent admitted defeat directly, which was obviously afraid of him. After 2 wins, his confidence was restored by more than half. Even in the face of Su Yuanhai, he had the confidence. He cupped his hands and said loudly, Fortunately, I didn't fail you and came back victorious. Su Yuanhai's eyelids twitched. Looking at Su Feng-chun, who still didn't notice anything wrong, he didn't know what to say for a moment. After holding back for a long time, Su Yuanhai suddenly felt a little tired. He waved his hand weakly and said, You are very good. Sit down. So, Su Feng-chun sat down happily. Seeing this, Su Li withdrew her gaze. Even a blind man could hear the whispers around him at this moment. Su Feng-chun was not stupid at all. On the contrary, he was very smart. Su Li glanced at the heads of the 4th branch and the 5th branch who were tempted, and transmitted the sound casually, "Don't waste resources on Su Fengchun in the future." Su Yuanhai didn't understand, but when he heard Su Li's words, he replied respectfully, "Yes, sir." With the end of the last round, the Su family's internal selection also came to an end. Other than the unlucky 6th branch Su, the other branches' teams stayed behind. The main branch occupied 2 teams. After the main branch elder announced the results, everyone dispersed. Su Daiyin stayed until the end. She didn't get up and walk out until she saw Su Yuanhai leave with his people. When she walked to the middle of the bloodstained arena, she suddenly stopped and said in a clear voice, "Tonight, we probably won't be able to sleep. You guys should also stay alert, don't fall into someone else's trap." The 3 young practitioners who followed Su Daiyin looked at the owner, who was not much older than them, and responded respectfully. When Su Yuanhai and the other 2 returned to the courtyard, Su Fengchun and Su Meng immediately returned to their rooms with the excuse of recovering their vital energy. Su Li also returned to her room silently and closed the door. "Don't come looking for me. Take care of yourself." Su Yuanhai heard Su Li's transmitted sound before she left. He sighed in his heart and walked back to his room with flagging interest. At this moment, no matter how slow he was, he could sense Su Fengchun and Su Meng's thoughts. Although he took Su Li as his master now, he still controlled the fate of the 7th branch of the Su family. The genius disciple was too narrow-minded, and now he was disloyal. How could he not be disappointed? "You are right. Our Su family does have some problems, and I am also responsible for it. When the next generation reaches the age of cultivation, I must ask you for advice on how to cultivate loyal disciples even if I have to be thick-skinned." Having made up his mind, Su Yuanhai was slightly refreshed. He didn't bother to remind the 2 who were not paying attention to Cao Ying about what would happen at night, and went directly to practice. In the blink of an eye, it was midnight, and the night was the darkest. 3 black shadows suddenly appeared in the quiet courtyard of the guest room. Obviously, the 3 black shadows were not from the same family. They appeared at the same time. They were stunned for a moment and then relaxed. The practitioners of the 7th branch were very familiar with each other, and the visitors were the heads of each branch. Even if they covered their faces, they could be recognized by the outline. The 7th branch, the last one, is visited by the heads of the 3 branches at the same time. If Su Yuanhai knows it, will he feel honored? Su Jinnan, the head of the 6th branch, dispersed the smoke that covered his face. He grinned silently and transmitted sound to the other 2. Su Daiying's eyelashes trembled, and she transmitted sound in a pleasant way, "I am only interested in Su Jojo. The other 2 are up to you. The head of the 2nd branch is really overbearing. You want the best one as soon as you speak." Su Linchen, the head of the 4th branch, snorted and transmitted sound, "But I am not interested in an outsider." Su Daiyin smiled and looked at Su Jinnan. The latter smiled. "Our 6th branch was completely annihilated. As long as someone represents our 6th branch to attend the tea party for immortals, it doesn't matter who it is. Thank you for your generosity." Su Daiyin thanked them casually. She took a deep look at Su Yuanhai's room, and then flew into Su Li's room. Su Jinnan and Su Linchen looked at each other. Needless to say, Su Jinnan went to Su Meng's yard, and Su Linchen went to find Su Fengchun. In the dark room, Su Yuanhai saw this scene and snorted in his heart, "They really think highly of me. 3 heads of the 6th branch have come in a row. Su Fengchun had a disloyalty, and he couldn't keep him. As for master, it should be Su Daiyin who should worry about him. Su Daiyin, don't be stupid. If you make master unhappy, I can't save you." Su Daiyin flew into Su Li's room from the window. The furnishings in the room were simple, and there were no gauze curtains. At a glance, she saw a petite figure meditating in the inner room. This scene immediately reminded Su Daiyin of her youth. She couldn't help but smile. She walked to the chair next to Su Li and sat down, deliberately making a sound. The next moment, Su Li seemed to feel something and suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing that there was one more person in the room, her pupils shrank slightly, but she still forced herself to calm down and said, "Senior, Why do you come so late at night? Su Daiyin had been observing Su Li's reaction. Seeing that Su Li was calm, Su Daiyin praised her in her eyes and said softly, I am Su Daiyin from the second branch of the Su family. Su Li was slightly stunned, and then immediately stood up and saluted, greetings to the head of the second branch. I am not very familiar with the elders of the Su family. Please forgive me. It doesn't matter. Su Daiyin squinted her beautiful eyes and looked at Su Li with more satisfaction. Su Jojo, you are talented, and your temperament is even rarer. It is inevitable that you will decline in the seventh branch. Have you ever considered changing to another branch? How about I teach you personally? Su Li straightened up, and her little face was full of confusion. She hesitated and said, Can I change? But the head of the Yuan High branch treats me well. How can I? Su Daiyin chuckled and said helplessly, Silly girl, the second branch is not hostile to the seventh branch. If you practice in the second branch, you can advance faster and reach Yuaning realm in a short time. You can even catch up with me soon. In this way, if you show some affection to the seventh branch of the Su family, Su Yuan High will definitely get more benefits than now. Is that so? Su Li blushed and scratched her head embarrassedly. I have to ask the opinion of the head of the Yuan High branch. If he doesn't care, I will go to you. Su Daiyin couldn't help but support her forehead. But seeing that Su Li valued affection, she liked her even more. No one wanted to raise an ungrateful person. Even if there were ungrateful people in the Su family, and many people were used to it, she didn't want this ungrateful person to fall into her hands. Okay, I won't force you. Just give me an answer after the tea party for immortals. As Su Daiyin said, she had made up her mind to knock some sense into Su Yuan High. It would be a pity if Su Yuan High couldn't cultivate some seedlings. Head of the second branch, I have a small question. I hope you can solve it for me. Su Li hesitated for a while and suddenly said. Su Daiyin was a little curious that Su Li didn't look like an indecisive person, but she hesitated because of a question. She nodded and promised, Go ahead. I will tell you as long as it doesn't cross the bottom line. Su Li's eyes dimmed, but she was relieved on the surface. She said directly, the head of the Yuan High branch once said that you didn't participate in the samsara 1,000 years ago. Shut up. Su Daiying's voice suddenly rose and overshadowed Su Li's. The atmosphere in the room became cold instantly. Su Li looked at Su Daiyin, whose expression changed instantly. A hint of understanding flashed in her eyes, but she pretended to be frightened and kept silent with her body tense. After a long time, Su Daiyin took off her veil and let out a sigh. She transmitted the sound, Su Yuan High even told you this. He really doesn't treat you as an outsider. But this is a taboo for the Su family, so I can only transmit the sound to you. Each practitioner has his own lucky chance. Holy Girl Su's lucky chance was extremely attractive to everyone in those years, including most of the people from the holy sects. But I am still not used to it. It is said that the natural law is changeable, and the lucky chance depends on the individual. Whether it exists or not depends on fate. But it is obviously the lucky chance of Holy Girl Su, but she was forced by a group of old demons to share it with everyone. That kind of thing is too despicable. Su Daiyin touched her chest. There are some things that I can't tell you, but the reason why I didn't go that year is not a secret. I didn't want to go, so I directly practiced in isolation to avoid the deadline of entering the reincarnation mirror. The Su family couldn't do anything to me. Su Li's eyes flickered, but she didn't ask again. Su Daiyin was very sincere. She told her everything except for the specific reason of practicing in isolation. As for the content of the practice, Su Li faintly guessed that it was probably other inheritance to be absorbed, such as Kang Lei's cave. Otherwise, the old ancestor of the Su family wouldn't be so easy to talk to. Anyway, Su Daiying's idea won Su Li's favor. Perhaps, the second branch can be the second branch. Su Li watched Su Daiyin leave and thought absent-mindedly. An hour later, 2 more black shadows left. Su Li stopped thinking and sighed faintly. How many lucky chances did I lose in the previous life? It's hard to collect them. Chapter 423. After Su Daiyin left, she probably said hello to the other branches. Su Li didn't see anyone come to her for the rest of the night. Su Fengchun and Su Meng were different. Even though they had agreed to the recruitment of the first 2 houses, the last 4 houses did not have as much influence as the first 3 houses. Although they had greeted them, there were still quite a number of people coming over in the second half of the night. It was almost dawn, and another group of people came. Soon, the faint screams of 2 people passed through the tactical matrix of the room and fell into her ears. Well, the 5th group, the peak of Jindan realm, Su Li murmured and turned to sit down on the rush cushion. It was the best time to practice when the purple air came from the east in the morning. Others might miss it, but she couldn't miss it. An hour later, the purple air dissipated, and the sky was bright. Su Li stretched and pushed the door open. Su Fengchun and Su Meng's door was open. No, even the door was gone. At this time, Su Yuanhai came back from outside. Glancing at Su Li, who was waiting at the door, he turned his head and shouted, "The spiritual boat is about to set off for the tea party for immortals." Su Fengchun, Su Meng, what are you waiting for? There was still no movement in the room. Anger flashed through Su Yuanhai's eyebrows, and his voice poured into the 2 rooms with the power of Yuanying realm. I give you 3 breaths. If you don't come out, get out. Su Jojo can go to the tea party for immortals alone. As soon as he said this, the 2 people in the room finally walked slowly to the door. Although their clothes were tidy, their faces. Why were there 2 pig heads? When Su Meng and Su Fengchun saw each other's pig faces, they were stunned for a moment. Then, their hearts relaxed, and smiles appeared on their sausage mouths. It was better to have someone to be humiliated with him than to be alone. Su Yuanhai's face darkened when he saw them. At this moment, he almost wanted to leave them and only take Su Li away. But he already knew about Su Jinnan and Su Linchen, so he had to take them. Useless things. You are a disgrace. Su Yuanhai cursed. Both Su Fengchun and Su Meng felt wronged. They didn't want to, but the first 2 batches were just practicing. But in the last few batches, they were more ruthless than the last one. They swarmed around him and aimed at his face. They even set up an array formation around the room. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. They had already become like this in the morning, and their faces had been specially reinforced with a secret technique. The swelling wouldn't go down in a few days, and they would be laughed at along the way with their pig heads. A moment later, Su Yuanhai came to the stone platform where the spiritual boat was parked. The appearance of Su Fengchun and Su Meng caused a roar of laughter. Ha 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 ha, why are there 2 pigs participating in the tea party? Is the threshold for joining the tea party so low now? They've been an eyesore to me for a long time. Which brother beat them up? It feels so good. If it weren't for the 2 owners who vouched for them, these 2 people might have lost an arm or a leg and be bedridden, unable to get up. I also heard that a wise man submits to circumstances. Poor 7th branch head Su Jojo seems to be, sure, you can't speak carelessly about the first 3 branches. You might get yourself killed. The man was so scared that his face turned pale and he stopped talking. Standing on the side of the stone platform, Su Yuanhai heard every word of the whispers, and his face became more and more embarrassed. Su Fengchun and Su Meng also heard a lot. After a while, they saw 6th branch head Su Jinnan and 4th branch head Su Linchen, who were alone, and felt uncomfortable all over. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai snorted and transmitted the sound to Su Jinnan and Lin Chen. After a while, his face eased a little, and he said to the 2, "Get out if you want. You 2 are not allowed to return to the 7th branch in the future, and I will order someone to throw out your servants." Su Fengchun and Su Meng froze, and then nodded silently. Without hesitation, they went to the door of the 4th branch and the 6th branch. Seeing this scene, many people felt it was shameless. But because the 2 owners were present, they couldn't make fun of them. After a while, Su Daiyin arrived with the disciples of the 2nd branch. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai hurriedly walked over with Su Li. Su Daiyin was not surprised to see them. She transmitted the sound with a smile, 7th branch head, what do you think? Su Yuanhai nodded slightly, and then shook his head, transmitting the sound, "Second branch head, you are right. Jojo's talent should not be buried in my hands. However, the seventh branch of the Su family must obtain the reward of this immortal Dao Tea Party. The seventh branch is really too weak. In the future, I will use the resources from the Tea Party to train another group of people." Su Daiyin looked at Su Yuanhai meaningfully and pondered in her heart. It seemed that Su Fengchuan's betrayal really hurt Su Yuanhai. Did it make him want to abandon the sectarian prejudice and bring in a disciple with another surname? She thought it was very good, but for the head branch, the seventh branch would be more and more unwelcome. "Seventh branch head, I agree to your request, and I don't lack the reward of the Tea Party for Immortals." Speaking of this, Su Daiyin glanced at Su Li. This girl didn't show her strength, but the Tea Party for Immortals would gather the talents of the whole Jojo region, and there would even be some talents who were invincible among their peers and could fight beyond their levels. She didn't think that Su Jojo would get the reward of the sect, but she obviously couldn't pour cold water on it. Su Yuanhai was already pitiful enough. After pondering for a moment, Su Daiyin raised her eyes and continued to transmit the sound. "Not only that, as long as Jojo joins the second branch and performs well, I will also provide some resources to support the seventh branch." Su Yuanhai was overjoyed at once and thanked her repeatedly. This scene was seen by the heads of the last 4 branches, and they all felt uncomfortable. There is always a gain for every loss. Su Yuanhai, this old guy, actually climbed up the tree of Su Daiyin with Su Jojo. "Tut, the second branch is second only to the head branch, and its cultivation environment is at least 3 times better than ours. Maybe in 2 years, the seventh branch will no longer be the weakest," and the sixth branch, Su Linchen and others looked at Su Jinnan. Su Jinnan, who had just obtained Su Meng, suddenly became gloomy and didn't speak. After a conversation, Su Yuanhai asked Su Daiyin to take Su Li to the Tea Party for Immortals under Su Li's secret hint, and he left on the pretext of an emergency. Su Daiyin saw that Su Yuanhai was so obedient, so she naturally agreed. She began to think about how to play the emotional card with Su Li during this time. At the same time, people of the seventh branch of Su family who went to the Tea Party for Immortals also came to the stone platform one after another. When everyone arrived, the elder of the Su family opened the tactical matrix and let everyone board the boat. The high-grade spiritual boat made a booming sound and disappeared into the sea of clouds. On the spiritual boat, Su Li and the disciples of the first 3 branches had a separate room because of Su Daiying's special care. The disciples of the last 4 branches basically had 2 or even 3 rooms. Su Meng came out for a breath with a swollen face. When he glanced at Su Li, who was looking at the sea of clouds outside his room, he couldn't help but feel jealous. Why was he chosen by Su Daiyin of the second branch, while Su Jojo had never made a move from beginning to end? Yes. Su Jojo didn't make a move. Su Meng suddenly thought of the point, and his eyes brightened. Isn't she powerful because of Su Fengchun? If she can't satisfy Su Daiyin after her strength is exposed, maybe Su Daiyin won't want her. Su Li sensed Su Meng's emotional fluctuations in an instant, but she didn't care. She went back to her room and thought quietly. She had planned for the Tea Party for Immortals 2 years ago. Now it had come to this point. Although Su Daiyin was there, it was not a bad thing. Yushu sect, how many traces of me are there after 1,000 years? My Ruahan, I heard that you are crazy. I want to see if you are really crazy or pretending to be crazy. Master, I hope you have never lied to me. Su Li rubbed the black lotus ring and leaned against the window to watch the sea of clouds churning outside. Her dark eyes flashed with waves that others couldn't understand. Hatred, confusion, and yearning were mixed together, and finally, it was so complicated that she didn't want to think about it anymore. Treasured livestock, this name definitely didn't come out of nowhere. Also, that nonsense about my flesh and blood strengthening luck doesn't sound too real no matter how I listen to it. But the 5 Su brothers really had many fortuitous encounters, and their cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. Su Li's eyes flashed. Hearing the footsteps of Su Daiyin outside the door, she might know. However, this topic was not as well known as the reincarnation mirror, so she couldn't ask. At least, not now. Soon there was a knock on the door. Su Li opened the door and saw Su Daiyin. She saluted and stepped aside, allowing Su Daiyin to come in. Su Daiyin shook her head and handed out a universe ring. She said with a smile, Su Jojo, this is the Tsuanjin elixir, which can remove the impurities in your Jindan and purify the power of Jindan. If you refine it to a certain extent, it is possible to upgrade the Jindan and reach the standard of the extreme Jindan realm. Although it is unlikely to reach the extreme Jindan realm before the Tea Party for Immortals, if you can refine a round of Jindan realm, your strength will be enhanced a lot. Su Li took the universe ring with gratitude and surprise in her eyes. She said repeatedly, "Thank you, head. I will refine it hard these days." A hint of disappointment flashed through Su Daiying's eyes, but she didn't show it on her face. She nodded with a smile and left. Su Li closed the door. The expression on her face instantly disappeared, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Little girl, you want to test my strength with this little trick? You're too naive." Su Daiyin returned to her room, but her eyes were still fixed on Su Li's room. She frowned slightly and muttered to herself, if she hasn't reached the extreme Jindan realm, how can she surpass Su Fengchun? Has she also comprehended the true meaning? Or does she have other trump cards? Could it be that she saw that I was testing her and tried to confuse me? Su Daiyin rubbed her eyebrows, and the last thought was instantly extinguished by her. Just now, Su Jojo's reaction was too natural. It was completely the joy of seeing something useful. It was impossible for her to deliberately deceive her. How could a child less than 200 years old have so many impure thoughts? If she did, she would not be a talent, but a monster. Thinking of this, Su Daiyin showed a smile on her face. Although Su Jojo had not made a move, how could she miss a 200-year-old practitioner at the peak of Jindan realm? Her eye sorcery would not lie. Chapter 424. Many names. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.